conservative listeners. This is the G Man, and this is Fired Up. This is a conservative talk show, but we welcome all people of all stripes, whether you're conservative, liberal, or my guest here, Big John, who's a libertarian and actually hosts his own show. Uh, but we just love to talk here, all conservative matters, and we love to even have disagreements. I mean, we might have some tonight. I don't know how the show's gonna go because Big John and I, we haven't talked about this yet, but I handed him my notes and we'll see what happens. But tonight we're gonna talk about Joe Biden's mental decline. Now, I want to start this with the idea that we understand Joe Biden has stage 4 prostate cancer, and I know John also shares this, that we hope he gets better. This is not one of those like, yeah, I hope he
Right,
dies. Like
right.
those people are stupid and crazy. They do not represent conservatives, all conservatives. It's just a minority, and you got people on the other side that do that as well. But
Right.
we hope he has a speedy recovery, and that he lives many, many more years longer. That doesn't mean we can't talk about things. That
Right.
doesn't mean that can be used as a reason to shut up and not hold our government accountable and our elected politicians accountable for what has happened. So tonight we're going to talk about what has happened over the past 5 years with Joe Biden, and a lot of it's going to revolve around fake Tapper. I mean, I'm sorry, Jake Tapper of CNN. There's another nickname called Jake Fapper. I don't want to use that, but we'll just do
No,
fake
no.
Tapper.
Family show so far. Family show.
Yes, yes. So we'll talk about Jake Tapper and his book, and it's going to revolve around some of the things that he talked about in his book. And look, we know Joe Biden was president for 4 years, but really, was he president for all those 4 years? I think the last 2 years, his group of advisors were probably the president, and that's where you really started to see things go downhill. So we're going to unpack some of the claims in the book about the evidence of Joe Biden's decline, the cover up. We're going to talk about the debate where everybody all of a sudden mysteriously figured out, oh, this guy's not all right in the head. I knew that a long time ago.
Right,
Um,
right.
and I'm not an insider. I'm just a guy who sits on his couch and watches the news. And we'll talk about the cancer diagnosis and the timing of it coming out publicly 3 days before the release of the book. Makes you wonder why that happened. So before we get into it, I want to start with Jake Tapper. He mentioned in a podcast with Ezra Klein of the New York Times. See, Big John, I listened to people on the left too. It was an
Okay.
hour and a half. I mean, I had to poke my eye out a little
Oh,
bit,
of course. With Ezra Klein, you might have to. Yeah.
but I listened to the whole thing. And Ezra Klein has the way he talks. It is that like East Coast ivory tower liberal accent that he has. But I powered through it. What I thought was interesting is Jake Tapper said that he had over 200 people talk, and not that they just kind of talk, but that they're eager to talk, and that it was almost like a weight was lifted off their heart. And when I heard that, I just kind of thought that's interesting, because you only feel a burden on your heart when you feel like you want to say something, you want to expose something, and you can't, and you're holding it secret, right? Like these people who go out and steal as, hey, you be my getaway driver, and then those guys go gray real fast, and then they have to tell someone, right? And then they tell someone, and then they both get arrested and thrown in jail. So I kind of reckon it's like a little like that. Well, what's your take? Like, why do you think these 200 people were just so eager to bust out and talk about Joe Biden, the
Right,
guy on their team, right?
right, right. Well, I think there might be a lot of different things at play here. One might be, and I don't know how this applies to insiders or Washingtonians or swamp creatures, take your pejorative of choice, but one could be inner turmoil, like you were saying, that conflict, that because I think all of us would be deluding ourselves if we thought that there aren't politicians, staffers, aides who say, I know this is wrong, but I'm going to look past it for the greater good. We see it all the time. And It's certainly not endemic to liberals. I mean, we could see it on both sides of the aisle. And it doesn't condemn the whole movement on either side, but you get it. Like we've all seen the caricature of the staffer, the bag man, or the bag lady who follows that politician around. No matter what they do, they cover up their affairs, a la JFK, a la Clinton. They
Right.
cover up some cognitive declines. Nancy Reagan, Ronald Reagan comes to mind. Uh, so you do have people who are enablers like that, that after the secret's out are like, I can't wait to talk about this. Or if they think, so there's the conscience, the guilty conscience slash heavy soul. That could be one explanation. The other one is, hey, look, it's a cutthroat world, and like all the rats on the Titanic, you're going to go scurrying when the boat goes down, right? Because you
Right.
need to get your next consultancy. You need to save your own hide. So there could be a lot of self-serving. I'm not saying all of them, but at least I would venture a percentage of them are like, I got to look out for my next gig because the way I feed my family is by being a political consultant or being a political staffer. And so maybe I think there's some of that at play, I would think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think of and at the danger of invoking Godwin's law
Mhm.
during Hitler, nobody spoke out. Now that was on fear of death, so it's
Right.
not exactly equatable. But once Hitler was in the bunker, he wasn't completely dead yet. But now people started jumping ship and saying, like you said, like I guess I'm on my own now, and I don't fear that I will be killed anymore, so I can just speak out or do whatever I need to do. So now that Biden's not the head of the party anymore, or or her husband, uh,
Right. Well,
then
well,
there's nothing
yeah,
to fear.
yeah, and you're right because to that extent, I know you mentioned Hitler, but there's other cases. Like I was just rewatching some documentaries on Ceausescu, Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania. Like the second they caught him, they couldn't wait up his former guard, his handlers, to say, yeah, he stole from the country. I say we execute him right away, which they did essentially, right?
Right, on
Ken
video.
on video, him and his wife, right?
Right.
And you got to, as sidebar, you got to admire Ceausescu because as they were executing him, he said, I know your faces. You will pay for this. Like he thought he was coming back from beyond the grave. But the same thing happened in fascist Italy towards the end of World War II, when you had all the Mussolini supporters who once the end was, the outcome was obvious. All of a sudden, they were part of the mob that strung them up and hung them in the town square, right? So
Yeah.
that type of behavior, although we just cited extreme examples, you're absolutely right. That's not uncommon in politics. Um, and yeah, so
Yeah.
the question though I want to have, as I know we progress along these talks, and I'll let you think about it. But I was thinking of the case of Woodrow Wilson and Edith Wilson. During when he had his what was it, a stroke, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
That's right.
she essentially,
1919, I believe.
yeah, yeah, right. She essentially ran the Oval Office. Like everyone knew that when she said, "Tell me what you need to tell the president, and I'll go in, tell him your question is, and I'll come back and give you the answer." Nobody seriously thought Wilson was giving her any answers or any directions. It was Edith Wilson making those decisions, and everyone pretty much knew it. Um, so, do you feel there's a precedent historically where an incapacitated president, because some people have also said that about Nancy Reagan and Ronald Reagan a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that this Biden situation, which I know you want to get into a little bit in depth, and I'm happy to listen to your opinions on that because I think they're important. How much of that do you think sets a historical precedence for what we might want to do once we investigate the Biden situation?
It's a historical precedent because these guys and left and right of all stripes, they're power hungry, right? They don't want to get rid of power. I mean, I'm on the school board, and I I've seen people come off the school board, and some of them have a hard time not tuning in and chiming in, even though they're not on the board anymore, because it is a little addictive to say, "Hey, I have a say," and people want to listen to me. So I can see presidents doing that. But I don't think it's right. I mean, I do know people have hid elements. I mean, we think of FDR, he hid his wheelchair. Now, that wasn't the days of TV, so that was easy to do. But JFK even hid his Addison's disease, right? I believe it was during the primary where LBJ actually started a rumor that JFK had Addison's disease, and RFK put the kibosh on that and said, "Look, you better not spread lies about my brother." But it wasn't a lie; it was true, and that was like shut down pretty quick.
Right.
So, um, and Reagan, I'm not so sure. Like, I watched his farewell speech. Now, maybe he could still read a teleprompter, but not. I won't actually bring up that one. I'll bring up the his last press conference where people were asking, the reporters were asking about
Right.
his debt and deficits and tax cuts and how he thinks different things happened, and he answered like cogently. It was nowhere near Biden, and I mean he's like
Right. Right.
his age was close, but I was listening to him. This is like maybe 6 months ago. I was watching on YouTube, and it was very close. So I'm not convinced that Reagan had any severe Alzheimer's at that point. Maybe a little bit, but not enough to notice.
Probably enough where he was run down by the end of the night, and if things
Yeah,
happened like after a certain, like not sundowning technically, perhaps, but yeah, there were rumors even from within Republican circles that if you got Ronald Reagan after like 5, 6 o'clock at night, you might have to deal with Nancy the rest of the night. For the
right. Yeah,
most part, like I mean, and I don't know if I'm happy to hear that or not, but I'm apt to believe that. You know what I mean?
yeah. Then, but to go to your question, I mean, if I gave Woodrow Wilson the benefit of the doubt, and I think he is one of the most dictatorial, racist presidents we've ever had, but I would say they wanted to push the League of Nations through, and without him at the head, I think they stood the chance of not push the League of Nations through in America so that America would be a part of it, and they didn't stand a chance if it was the vice president doing that. So I think that would have been the biggest motivation because he had the stroke going
Right.
cross country trying to push America into the League of Nations. So but let's move on to Joe Biden and talk about some of the signs of his decline. I noticed this early on during the primaries in 2019. Actually, if we rewind back to 2016, he actually seemed fine. I
Right.
mean, a little slower than he did in 2012, but that debate between him and Paul Ryan, I mean, he was on it. I mean, that guy was sharp as a tack and witty. 16, he seemed fine. 19, I'm watching this guy, and during the debates, it was bizarre. I mean, he at one point he goes, "If you believe in what I say, go to Joe 300330.com."
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I, as a libertarian, you often say I have no horse in this race, right? And
Yeah,
as much as I have TDS, you could hate on Trump all you want. It doesn't change the objective reality of how Biden came across, right?
right.
And the fact that you could tell he was lost towards the end, like even if I give him like the Reagan-esque pass for the first 2 years of his presidency, clearly the back half, the back nine of his presidency, he clearly wasn't there. Uh, he couldn't speak. He was lost on stage. Um, yeah, he was clearly not there. And to what a lot of people have said, that's probably the biggest failing of the Democrats is that they refuse to acknowledge it. They refuse to deal with it early. People have short memories in politics.
Yeah,
You acknowledge this halfway through his administration, have him resign, have Harris take over after year two, you stand a better chance than what you did because at least at that point you say, look, everyone gets old. We had a pope retire for God's sake, which I don't think has ever happened in the history of the church. I think I could be wrong about that. To have a retired pope, they usually just die in their position, right?
yeah,
So we've seen things like that, and I think people can accept that if you say, look, the guy just happens to a lot of the population in the U.S. But yeah, it was obvious he had lost the ability to function independently. I would say, to be
yeah.
kind.
I
Yeah.
mean, well, definitely throughout his term, but back in the beginning, I mean, Jake. So here's the thing: that controversy about Jake Tapper, because in 2020, I believe it was October, the month before the election, he was interviewing Laura Trump, and Laura Trump said, "Well, it's obvious that Joe Biden's having a mental decline." And Jake Tapper, who's supposed to be like an objective journalist, I mean, he's not a commentator; he was a anchor, right? I believe. I could be wrong on that, but he rolls his eyes and goes, "Oh, come on, you're a uh, a mental. You can diagnose that, like you're trained to do that." And now he comes out with this book where all of a sudden Jake Tapper's trained to do that. I mean, we could ask the same thing, right? So there was some level of, okay, Trump derangement, right? Like, I know you're not a Trump person, right? But
Right.
there's a certain level of Trump derangement. Like, okay, let's just cover over Biden's flaws because
Right.
anybody but Trump, and the media was complicit. Do you share that view that you think the
Yeah.
media covered it up just so that, well, the liberal media, but I would even say if you don't consider ABC, CBS, and NBC liberal, do you think those three also were complicit with that?
Yes, I do. Yeah. So one of the things is you could be anti-Trump and still agree with some of what he says.
Yeah.
Like I remember when William Del Pilar and I, who is usually co-hosting with you here on Fired Up, when we first started this venture, I said to him, like, and Walter Cronkite was a communist, right? And he was working against the Americans all, the American system all along, right? And he goes, Walter Cronkite, are you kidding me? Everybody's most trusted voice, the guy who talked us through the JFK assassination. I said, do your research, you'll see. He was essentially a humanist slash communist, right? And I think a couple of weeks later, he came back and said, wow, I didn't realize that. In my youth, working my way through college, I had the opportunity to work on Abe Rosenthal's penthouse apartment on Park Avenue, New York City. Abe Rosenthal, for those that may not know, used to be the publisher of the New York Times or the editor in chief, I forget, but he was up there, right? He was a guy making decisions. And as wont to do as a teenager, I'd be there arguing politics with him. And the guy was super left wing. It's like you can't hide that. I mean, it's part of your being. I can't hide the fact that I'm anti-Trump, right? But that's part of my personality, and I think that's okay as long as you acknowledge that and people are aware that you are, because then they listen to what you have to say from that perspective, right? So
Yeah.
are the major networks, generally speaking, left leaning, to be kind to them? Absolutely. We can analyze and understand why that is, right? Because the left was always viewed as the defenders of free speech. When you and I were TikTok age, G, as many centuries ago as that may be,
Yeah.
the left was always viewed correctly, by the way, as the defender of free speech. It was always the right who was trying to silence people, whether it was on pornography, rock and roll lyrics, questionable visual mediums, whatever. It
That's
was
right.
always
Yeah.
it was always the
That's
right, the moral majority, etc. Right?
yeah.
Um, so legacy media having a vested interest in a broad interpretation of the First Amendment, well, you know what they did? They said, we're pushing the leftist agenda because it's in our own self-interest to do so. And what I think has happened is, especially the legacy media, hasn't acknowledged the shift. Now, maybe that's because too many of their CEOs are from that era, from our era, where the left was always perceived as the defenders of the media. But I don't think there's any doubt that if not overtly, then subtly, there's a left-wing bias. To your point, how conscious were they of it? Like,
Right.
was there a concerted effort where they all, like, metaphorically speaking, got together in a smoky back room and said, look, the president is nuts. We got to divert from this. We got to lie about it. We got to hide it. And to me, there's always that fine line, right? Because did they do something like that? Do you think there was a coordinated effort to ignore the reality of Biden? Or do you think it was a combination of we hate Trump so much? And if we're being honest, we're all liberals or Democrats to begin with in the media. Do you think that that was like more the case?
So before I answer your question, we want to welcome William Del Pilar, the main host of the show. He's going to be the guest for tonight. So welcome on, and he's got his TDS hat? Is that what that is? Oh no, it's a MAGA
Anti-TDS.
hat. MAGA
Yeah.
hat.
And off, can you guys hear me pretty well?
Yeah.
you sound
Go
great.
ahead.
All right, so
In
I'm
all
gonna.
fairness, it's I've been working all day, and so I had to throw something together real quick, and I figured let me put on Big John's favorite hat there. You know, so yeah, I'm glad to be on. Don't know how long I'll be on, but I've been listening to the show.
So why don't you answer the question? You heard this question, right? It was how coordinated is the liberal media in their anti-Trump efforts during the 2020 election to hide. I mean, you could talk about the Hunter Biden laptop, but more specifically, what we're talking about tonight, hide Biden's decline. Were they just monkey see no decline, or were they coordinated, or were they just acting on their own? Before I answer that, I'll let you answer it.
Oh, you mean if I think it was a cover up? Is what you're asking? I missed the first
by
part.
the media.
Yeah.
On the media's
I got to give Trump. You know, I confuse Big John and Trump all the time here. Yeah, I got to give Big John credit. When I first met Big John 30 years ago, we didn't get in an argument, but I was in denial. Oh, you know, Walter Cronkite was a liberal. You know, he said this, said that. Like, no, not Walter. No, the most trusted man in America. Well, turns out Walter Cronkite was a bleeding heart leftist liberal. Liberal. I don't want to say leftist because the terms have changed meaning.
Well, Big John called him a communist, but
well, yeah, but the point is you only very rarely would that come out. He tried to present the news in a different aspect. And I was a political junkie throughout the Reagan era, not watching. We didn't have the internet. But then when I started KFFL, I became a big political junkie because you're working 16-hour days. I had to put politics on and ESPN News. And ESPN News, as Big John can tell you, the shows would just recycle over and over and over. So it was pretty much on for emergencies. But in my long-winded way, what I want to say is a 180 happened. The neutrality went to the wayside. And I used to watch hardball. I used to love hardball. You know, I used to watch CNN. I grew up with CNN. For those of you youngsters out there, CNN made its mark in the first Persian Gulf. They were just an up-and-coming network. But when the Persian Gulf happened, you saw what do they call it? Front page, not front page, but
actually, William, it was the Iran hostage crisis that launched CNN.
No.
True, but my dad
it hit its stride in the Persian Gulf.
Okay. My dad subscribed to cable just to get CNN.
Right. Yeah. But what blew, we're digressing, but this is what makes it fun. What blew up with the hostage crisis? That's still in existence today.
Oh, Nightline.
Nightline blew up. You know, Nightline was just every so often show. I can't remember, but then they said we're going regular every day until the hostages get back. So,
Ted Koppel.
Yes, Ted Koppel. Oh. And
by the way, David Durden, you're asking what's on William's hat. That's "Make America Great Again."
There you go. So, but the point is, a complete shift happened, and I saw that shift happen, and I eventually stopped watching because I stopped watching once the Republicans they brought on were just the type of Republican today. So, a big shift where the leftists could do nothing. It became fanatical. Leftists could do nothing wrong. You know, as I said, if Trump walked on water, they would say he was racist towards H2O. You know, we got to protect that culture. So yes, the cover up was blatant. Look, and I heard you cover it. You know, I'm like, F you. Every human being in this world since the dawn of time has had a grandmother, a grandfather, watched their parents grow old. You may not be able to medically diagnose if it's dementia. I mean, what form of dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or whatnot. But how do you go to the doctor? Poppy, something's wrong here. You know, we need to go to the doctor. Anyway, and I worked in the industry, and Big John, I would agree with you. His best years were those first 2 years, but it was already developing. He had the early onset, and you can still be functional. The drugs work, monitoring your time when you're up, when you go to sleep. All that can be carefully monitored. So I would speculate it happened. They probably started showing signs right around 2016, 2018. It was managed, and right around 2022, it went off the rails, and it was one cover up. But let's not forget, and today in Afghanistan and this and that, and pause for applause. He would say statements like that. He would read in the parentheses what his cues, and those were the early signs. His beating up on Corn Pop, the hairy legs, that's just Joe Biden being a dumbass. But you saw the signs. And that debate, there were a couple of moments, but that debate and this, and we conquered Medicare or whatever he said. We beat, and what he was trying to say was we beat COVID. But he was just so flabbergasted. And at that point, now getting to the Jake Tapper situation, he was part of the cover-up. We've all, I'm sure Big John, I know G has seen it, but John, have you had an opportunity to see the Jake Tapper Laura Trump?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw that.
We talked about that.
That was denigrating. That was being abusive. We've all been in that position where you had the power and you had the control to be abusive, to whether it's a subordinate at work, to a close. It's a power dynamic. And I'm not one of these, men are bad, women, but it struck me as if you're a feminist, you hated that moment because he literally dressed her down and was arrogant and disrespectful to her, and he lied. Well, who are you? Yeah, and that angered me because if I had been Laura, I would have said no, but I can freaking tell you when something's wrong, as can most of America, and he has not been humble. This is what's happened. They have taken this to shield themselves. The storyline has shifted from 200 people were telling us this, and this to it's a complete shift to how could they have lied to us? How could they have fooled us? They told us this, they told us that. I'm like, well, what the hell? They told you. So you're a journalist. Are you going to believe everything from the government straight face? John, all three of us have been around. No, you have to question everything they said, but they're using that book to shield. They lied to us. No, you didn't do your job, and you were part of the cover-up. And the great thing about see, guys, this has become a political issue, and rightfully so in many cases. But the reality of it is this is a nonpartisan issue. Like y'all mentioned Reagan. I think maybe there's some truth to it, but nobody ever picked up on it. These are stories that came out. So if it did happen, they hit it very well. Because I got angry at a story, that Reagan was obviously in his latter stages. And then when the writer put it, and as I looked at him and he looked at me, I could see that twinkle. He knew who I was. I'm like, bull bleep. He was so far gone by that point that I'm like, they make crap up.
I think it was 1994. I saw him on some news thing, and Reagan was gone, right? Like he was really out there.
Oh, yeah, at that point, yeah.
I was telling Big John earlier in the show, I watched some YouTube videos of Reagan. He did a press conference. I think it was the last few weeks of his presidency. He was cogent and making great arguments, intelligent. He was all there. But again, Big John made a good point that, it might be like he's fine before 8 p.m., which was the same thing with Joe Biden. Yeah.
Right.
So,
well, here's the thing,
Big John, can you put the comment by David Durden on?
Sure, yeah.
And the thing, too, though, is we are getting this. That's all hearsay, so nobody really looks at that. But we have there's so much film, so much video that's easily available. You can see it with Biden. And then you have the it's not just him, Mitch McConnell. Right. I have my two imitations. Who am I? Karen Bass. Who am I?
Let me get a Mitch chance McConnell. To answer the question. So the question was...
I'll put it up again.
Yeah, that was pretty quick. I didn't even see it.
Oh, not that question, but yeah. So Biden has been at least for like 47 years. I think it was 50 some odd, but yeah. But now we poopy pants. Like he's an old guy. He's far gone. They should have just admitted that, okay, this guy can't do the job anymore.
Right.
I personally am grateful he did not, and only in terms of we don't have President Harris right now. So that's why I'm grateful that he did not step down and prevented that. I think would have been a bigger disaster. But let me go back to answering Big John's question. Do I think it was a coordinated effort by the liberal media to hide this? Not coordinated. I think the media, and I would include ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, and I would say most of CNN, although they've gotten a little more fair, well, at least some of the anchors, but they just hire people who think liberal. And that's why they all kind of see this same thing we're seeing, right? Go to Joe 30030 and of the people, by the people, and all the rest. Well, come on now. Let's just what I'm talking about. Like they see those moments and they just kind of go, well, he has a stutter. I mean, that's a huge reach to go from Joe 30030.com to that's a stutter. Like, no, his stutter didn't come back all of a sudden. I think they either wanted to see or they knew, and they're like, no, we want Trump to lose. We can't have Trump. Probably talk themselves into thinking he's a danger to democracy, which I don't agree with. So
Yeah, I think, and this isn't an excuse, right? But I think there's a panic that set in, right? And the panic was, look, Trump looks like he's going to win. And
oh, John, keep finishing out. But yes, that was the panic. They were like, Biden's the only one who can beat Trump. You're spot on that. That they were panicking because they did not think. They're like, no, you're right. Go on. Sorry.
yeah, that's okay. No. So
you're talking 2020 or 2024?
24.
24. In 2020, their plan executed perfectly, right? It's like, let's get the one guy who could beat Trump. Let's get somebody in there non-divisive, right? And so they're saying we could do this again in 24. Because don't forget, if Biden wins in 2024, regardless of whether he finishes the administration, his term or not, it pushes Trump out so far that no one's probably going to elect an 84, 83-year-old
right
for the presidency, right? So in their mind, look, the guy's sputtering, but we got to make it to the finish line. Somehow, we got to make it. So at some point, whoever his major strategists were, whether it was Jill Biden, whether it was the DNC, whatever, they got together and said, we have a choice to make 2 years out.
Right.
Do we kind of hope he makes it to the finish line in one piece? Or do we cut bait now and give us 2 years to build up Harris while she's still in office? Invoke the 25th or have the guy resign, whichever one. Get him out of there, get Harris in there, give her a chance to build a resume that's actually like, look, 2 years is an eternity in voters' minds.
Oh, Big John, that was going to happen. You're referring Mike Donlin, for the audience, is a longtime Biden supporter, 30 plus years. He was the one running the campaign and all. You guys are forgetting one aspect. He himself said he was a transition president. It wasn't about grooming Biden. It was about opening it up to the next generation. And what happened, it was a trip in Europe sometime. And Jill Biden sat there and said, it was in a conversation or something, and she mentioned something about having to get fit or get ready for the upcoming campaign. And that's when she kind of let the cat out of the bag, because everybody thought, and they said they were one and done. I don't mean to digress, guys, but what I just said brings up an interesting point. Let's just pause on this because we assume. But I'm curious, I apologize, Jee. I'm curious to know your thoughts on the fact, at what point did Jill Biden, we all agree Woodrow Wilson and FDR, their spouses ran the campaign. It was lock, stock, and barrel. It's much more difficult. I mean, let's not forget, Jill Biden chaired a cabinet meeting. So at what point did she take her and Donlin? See, that's the real controversy here. This is the biggest story. I mean, everybody's focusing on the pardons, and they should, because over 2,000 pardons, it like quadruples anything in history. A lot of people who would never have been pardoned by anybody else. There are now reports of payoffs potentially coming. But I mean, that's a big thing. But policy was being set. You know, whether you like him or not, Trump is right. There's a lot of far left policies that went through this administration that are cogent. Big John, what the hell does cogent mean? Because I assume that means he's of sound mind, sound this, sound that.
Yeah.
That's what it means. Yeah.
It's just, I've been in the Alzheimer's industry. The first time I heard cogent was like the last few weeks.
I think that means like the mind sticks together. And
that's what I thought, kind of like an amoeba mesh, and it's all working together. So a lot, if he'd been cogent, a lot of this policy may not have gotten through. And so the travesty done. So I'm curious, when did Jill and Donlin take over? Because remember, they hit cabinet members.
Yeah, no, that's a great, and I have this in my notes to kind of go through, and I'll just go through it quickly. But I think it started right around Afghanistan. I mean, it wasn't that far into his presidency,
Whoa,
and his
that's early.
cabinet was asking him, "Hey, we need to get the president's ideas on what to do with Afghanistan," and they're like, "Well, he's taking a nap right now." Like, okay, so I think Afghanistan actually lands squarely on Joe Biden's shoulders because it's the politicians who care what the public perception of a policy is, right? The generals are not going to care. They're just going to say, let's get our people out of there. And they're just uh, in, interested in performing and executing the mission. Joe Biden would have actually, or a president that's aware would say, oh, no, wait, hold on. You got to make sure that this, and this, and this, I don't want a disaster on my hands. So I think it started there. It was really early on. But then you go to the border, and the border was a complete mess. And what I'm reading is you're right. Mike Donlin, Steve Ricchetti, uh,
Yep, Ricchetti.
Annie Tomasini, Anthony Bernal, Jake Sullivan, which
Yes, Jake Sullivan.
yeah, he was one of the big guys. Anthony Blinken and Ron Plain, which I think he was president for at least 2 to 3 of those years. He was the real 46th president. I mean, these guys are running the show, and Jill Biden sitting at the head of the table. Um, she was President Biden. I mean, Joe was, the first husband, I think. So,
Right.
you're looking at years and years of this happening, and Joe Biden would go out there as a figurehead. And the book Original Sin by Tapper says that there were limited cabinet interactions. Jill kept a really tight leash on Joe, and there were actually no meetings between October 2023 and September 2024. I mean, that's a whole year, and that's just amazing. So what I will tell you is when he came out of his shell, right, and he gave the State of the Union speech, I don't know what kind of drugs they gave him, or maybe it was just a monster drink. That's what's in here. Monster, peach monster drink right here. But it worked. I mean, I watched this guy. I'm like, oh my gosh, he looks strong. Maybe I was wrong about his mental decline. And then what was it like?
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, the Her um, interview happened, and then he published his report. Actually, I think it was a few weeks later the report was published. Maybe the interview happened before,
Right.
and then he had the news conference. And then news conference, he was right back down to mental decline Joe, which I think all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this guy. And that was a problem because the primaries were already way in effect, right? This is February, March of 2024. So I was reading a book called Fight, the wildest
Oh, gee,
battle for the White House.
just real quick.
Yeah,
Don't forget, they destroyed everybody to have him go unchallenged in the primary. So they were
that's
starting
right.
to dig
Right.
their way. I'm
Right.
sorry. Go
Actually,
ahead.
I think one House member
Oh,
did
a
try to
couple of
challenge him.
nobodies. A couple of nobodies said
Yeah,
screw
right.
you, but
Yeah,
I mean they were nobodies. RFK was John's favorite libertarian. Was the closest to it, and he was a non. He's popular, but when you look at the ballots axis, he was a non-starter too. They locked there. I didn't want to change your thought, but that's an important point to note.
yeah,
We see all this, and they're still insistent on him not being challenged. I think because debates would have destroyed him.
right. So I just want to get to the point of the debate, right? So I'm just leading up to that because this book, Fight, and it's written by two center left, I don't know how far left, and they interviewed a bunch of people. And what was happening in the Trump and the Biden campaigns during last spring is that the internal polling showed that Trump was going to beat Biden on both campaigns, right? And it was pretty decisive. So the Biden camp said, we need to change the narrative. This is June. And if we don't change the narrative and the internal polling, which all these Democrat insiders are seeing, that he might face a primary challenge by the convention. So that's why they had the debate in June. And it was a Biden camp that said, hey, let's debate. And Trump said, great, let's do it now. Let's drive his poll numbers down further. And that actually kind of backfired on Biden and Trump. I mean, Trump's like, we destroyed him, but now we got a candidate who's better, right?
That was
So,
my
but
fear. That was my fear, and it
right.
came true.
Right. So, anyways, let's talk about the debate. And David Durden also had some comments here that he kid-friendly show. He pooped his pants during the debate. That's what messed him up. And then some say he had a body double. I looked the body double thing. Would you guys think Biden had a body double?
No, I
No,
don't think he had a
no.
body.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, but we got to be realistic here. Yeah, and even if they did, it's the greatest con ever because it's so unbelievable that that only the that 99.9% won't believe it. But
Right.
but they're right though. He was sharp, but having worked in that industry, and they took a big risk. They probably drugged him up. They probably made sure he was not. They probably changed his cycle to prep him for that. Because remember,
You're talking
he's
about
always
the
been
debate?
low key. No,
You're
no, I'm
talking about
talking about his that big speech he gave where
the State
he
of the
said,
Union.
yeah. So they worked around that because that was a big moment. That was marked on the calendar. So they did everything you can to make sure he was presentable there. But it's still a risk because he could have still gone off.
You know what that reminded me? If you guys are Star Trek fans of the original series, did you ever see the John Gill episode where he was like the Führer of some planet and he would only speak from behind the curtain? But then when he had to appear, that second in command guy would just shoot him up full of drugs just long enough for him to wake up and wave, and then they'd let him pass out again.
Yep.
And that probably is sort of like what was going on with Biden. See, I think part of this. Oh, William, are you going to jump off? Or you want to stay?
I just want to fix the camera. I'll be right back.
Oh, okay, go ahead. So, I think what happened was that, we don't know to what extent he might have been able to make decisions at certain points. And I know this is stretching it, but I think the reason this doesn't go anywhere legally is the following. And I'll use a Trump example, right? I think it's pretty well known, even amongst his fans, that Trump doesn't like to read, right? Like people have to show him stuff in graphs, pictures, videos, but there's these stories, and it goes back to his business days, that people would hand him printed reports and say, okay, here's the plan, here's the audit, whatever. And he would just toss it aside. He just does not like to read. To some extent, right? To some extent,
Yep.
He's dependent on his staff to give him the synopsis of anything, whether it's a military synopsis or whatever. So here's a question I have for you, just playing devil's advocate.
Yep.
To what extent is he running the government? Now, I understand force of personality, and I'm not suggesting that he has Alzheimer's or anything like that. But if I'm a duplicitous Democrat, of which there are many, would I counter you and say, okay, Joe had his problems, but actually he was awake from 2 to 3 p.m. every day, and that's when they crowded all the major decisions in front of him, when his mind was sharp and his aides did all the reading for him. So yeah, he didn't sit there and read 2,000 pages of defense analysis or CIA reports. Somebody came into him. They knew they had 5 minutes to get to him, and they would say, "Hey, Joe, A, B, or C?" B. Okay, good. We're out. We're done for the day. That's the major decision for the day.
Right.
And if someone says like, "Hey, that's somebody else running the government," then you could counter to, as we talked about, G, whether it was Reagan, whether it was Trump to some extent, like. We understand that a lot of these politicians, especially the ones who are more like camera facing, most of their work, just like with the Supreme Court justices, is done by their staff, by their clerks, by their pages, whatever. And you're either the figurehead or you do one thing. I want to see this result, and then you walk away, other people execute it, and then you come back. So to what extent do you guys feel that if you're looking for some sort of legal, I don't know, retribution, if that's the right word, against the Biden administration with the auto pen, with everything else, how much do you think that a credible defense is, yeah, look, the guy wasn't doing cartwheels, but we got him when we needed to get him, and he was awake when we needed him to be awake, type of thing?
Well, what I will say is most legislators do not read what they're writing either, right? They're told by their aides, and there's 23, 24, 25-year-olds doing all the reading and then summarizing it to the senator or the congressman. Right. So that's going to happen at all levels. I think that it even happens at the state level, although the AB Assembly and the Senate bills, SBs here in California tend to be 1 or 2 pages. So if those guys are not reading it, they're just highly lazy. But to answer your question as far as presidents, I mean, I know some presidents have been micromanagers, and they'll
Right.
sit there and get into the weeds of it. And
Jimmy
I think
Carter
that's it.
famously. Jimmy
Yes.
Carter famously was a
Yeah.
micromanager. Yeah.
And that's totally ineffective. And then there are guys who see the big picture and have a more of a holistic, this is the principles that I want this to go by. But they stay at a high level, but they still make the final decision, right? I think in Biden's case, I don't think he was cogent enough to make any final decision, at least in the last 2 years of his presidency. And I think he didn't know. I mean, I don't think he would remember who Anthony Fauci was. Somebody else had to say, okay, Anthony Fauci is requesting a pardon from going all the way back to January 1st, 2014. And some Ron Klain or whoever said, okay, sure, let's do that. Let's make sure that happens. So, William, what do you think?
All right, so this is how life works. That happens here at Grumblings Media. I do my notes and I send them out to the group. So I'm doing that job here, and the group sits there and looks at my notes. In regards to what you're saying, John, Trump from day one has had everything printed out and given to him. This story just surfaced just the other day on another podcast, and it got really heavy when the internet, because he doesn't do email. So his whole life was constant printouts. But in the Navy and when you're running a corporation, you have to have your life like that because you don't have time for every details. I think Trump has a hand in every decision, but like any POTUS, he doesn't do the president. That's the point with Biden. That's the question. However, John, using your framework that you gave, you can't look at it that way because the out is, hey, we had him when we needed him. You have to figure out. That's why
I get that. I'm saying like how much I get it, and I'm playing devil's advocate, by the way.
Yeah, right.
How
much of a defense is it? Is what I'm saying. I'm not saying.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Way.
You're going to have to go to the medical side. You're going to have to get that White House doctor who nobody has heard a word
Dr.
from.
Dr. Connor.
And put his ass under oath. That's
I
the
think
big
they're
key.
going to be subpoenaing him.
See, John, the issue is this is like when Jamie Miller entered the world. We were not going to see Jamie anymore. He got a great gig. Jamie Miller, who came on to co-host with us, got a great gig. So we wish Jamie Miller the best of luck there. But that said, as he said with the voting, once the vote's in there, you can't pull it out. It's next to impossible. Everything that's been done, it's next to impossible. So what we've got to do, we have to set this up to where it can't happen again. But if there's a way to have criminal, and when I say retribution, I'm not talking conservatives. I'm not talking Republicans. I'm talking the American people. We were lied to. We were lied to, and that can't happen again. And this lie goes back to Woodrow Wilson, to JFK. I mean, yes, JFK too, but our wheelchair, polio. FDR. I think innocuous.
William, you bring that up. Let me ask you something. So I was watching Bill O'Reilly the other day, and he was on with Chris Cuomo. It's on YouTube. I want to say it was earlier this week. And Bill O'Reilly made the claim, this is bigger than Watergate. This is way more far-reaching because Afghanistan, the border, you have all these things that happened, and was Biden even aware enough? And they should have come clean saying, we can't have this guy calling the shots because he doesn't really know what's going on. So do you agree with Bill O'Reilly that it's bigger than Watergate?
Oh, my God. This is the biggest cover-up in modern American history, because of the ramifications of his policies of people died, the 13 soldiers. And whether you agree with immigration or not, hundreds of women and men have died because of those policies. So not to mention his domestic and foreign policy. So there's all kinds of things that affected the American people. So that's how you have to look at it. So yeah, we can't have this happen with any president. So for example, you were talking about Reagan. Reagan fell asleep during some of those Iran-Contra hearings. He's an old guy, this or that. But in the future, dude, if you got to be president, you got to stay awake, So we've got to see. Joe Biden refused.
Monster drink.
Yeah. He refused to take the cognitive test. Now, I'm not 100% believer in those cognitive tests for the borderline. Now, I think this is that debate, but it's an easy one to figure out to the guys where Biden was at today versus where Biden may have been in 2018, 2019 while campaigning. But we need that cognitive test has to be mandatory, I believe, and for Trump too. But I got to give Trump credit. I mean, you guys remember Trump during the inauguration? Freaking 3 a.m. He's having a good time signing executive orders. I mean, they'll catch him sometimes. Like,
I want to know what his monster drink was.
Well, Adderall. Saudi Arabia.
Adderall. It was Adderall.
He was Saudi Arabia and dozed off, a little. So he has his moments too. But for all intents and purposes, Trump's what you call an outlier. I don't think most people that age, we can't have. Maybe I don't know. Let me ask you guys. Gee, I don't mean to take over here, but should there be an age limit? Is Joe Biden the poster child for age limits? Because remember, there is an age limit for the presidency. You got to be 35.
Yeah,
so I'm still a couple of years from able to run.
I don't think so. I don't think there should be an age limit on the high end, but there should be a cognitive test for sure, or some kind of regular medical test done.
But to answer John's question, you can't. It's a lose-lose taking it from your perspective because they can
before
play
we
that
get to the comments, I want to ask Big John. So bigger than Watergate, yes or no, and why? For the audience who are coming in late, Big John is our resident libertarian. So
yes, and
different opinion than William and I.
Right, and feel free, by the way, if you're out there, hit us up in the comments, X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble. We'll be able to see it, and if it's even interesting in the least, or if you just want to say hi, we'll pop it up on the screen. But do I think it's bigger than Watergate? Not in real time, obviously. In real time, Watergate, we were exposed to it as it happened, basically, right? And it did end up, in essence, in the resignation of a president, of Nixon.
Right, John, you're right. The big story is he resigned because the senator said you don't have the votes. But at the end of the day, it was a tape incident. It was mean people, mean girls. I mean, you boil it down, you strip everything away. It was politics, and they wanted Nixon out.
Well, it was
the cover-up.
No, it was the cover-up. It was the cover-up of a breaking and entering that got him, and it didn't help that he let Agnew out to dry. So that pissed off a lot of his own
had
party.
Nothing to do with it. It's his mouth and his stupidity that got that created the cover-up. My point is the ramifications of Watergate and Biden.
Yeah, but here's a question I have for you. Fine, let's say. And I might, even if I gave it enough thought, agree with you guys, right? But let's say the question is, what do you do about it? To William's point, okay, there's nothing really that you can do. What are you going to do? You can't like negate his stuff. You would have to do it politically, right? There's no law. Right. You would have to do it politically, right?
Well, I don't know, John. See, that's just it. That law.
Hit the last comment on the screen because that goes right into it. By David Durden. He said, must find out who controlled the auto pen, right? Did Biden actually pardon? I mean, I'm sure Hunter Biden, yes, but all the other people or all the other last minute decisions was that won't fly either because that's staff work. That's staff
John,
work.
You're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
You can't prove it, right? Actually, Biden will just say yes.
It's not a matter of proving it or not, guys. Stop. It's a matter are there laws against it? And there likely aren't any laws. So they can prove all this, and that's what the investigation should be for. And then you create, I mean, we all want smaller government. You create laws, regs, or whatever, where this type of stuff can be penalized, can be sent people to the prison. But it's a high threshold. So that makes it tough. But it puts somebody in check. Well, if I do this and I get caught, I'm screwed. Versus there's no law.
Well, yes and no, right? Because listen, Congress in general is very loath to put in constitutional amendments, and they're very loath to put checks on themselves other than political ones, right? So, for example, when Trump got impeached, I was shocked to find out that there are no rules in the Senate trial of an impeached president or an impeached anybody, right? There's no rules of evidence. There's no like prosecution and defense. right? There's nothing, right?
Well, John, the accusation is so broad. Most courts would go,
right,
get out of here with that.
right. And I'm not even debating whether Trump should or should not have been impeached, whether Clinton should have been, But I'm saying, like, once it gets to the Senate, and I pride myself on knowing a little bit about government, I assumed there was some sort of procedural rules that are in place, right? But it just turns out to be a free-for-all, like on Idiocracy, where they were having cage matches in the Senate, right? Like, that's really what it comes down to. So you say to yourself, okay, Trump, for better or worse, during his first term, exposed a lot of loopholes. Remember how we were all talking, can he pardon himself? Everybody would say, like, people would say, like, well, of course he can't pardon himself. And then someone would say, like Eastman would say, well, point to me in the Constitution where it says he can't pardon himself.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, crap. Well, shouldn't they pass a law clarifying that? Okay, whoever does it the first time will get away with it. Okay, fair enough.
And that's where we're at here. That's where we're at right now.
Right. But ask yourself this. How many of these situations that have been exposed over the last 100 years has Congress actually rectified by codifying it into law? The only one I could think of is the 25th Amendment, where if a president's cabinet gets together and says the president's incapacitated, he's still alive, he's still breathing. So
hold on. That brings up a great question. So they kept the cabinet from Joe. Is there any possibility somebody in the back, we can't let that cabinet know? They could invoke
it's possible.
Overridden. It requires a vote of Congress to say, yes, we agree with you.
And doesn't the VP have to agree too? Isn't that part of the criteria for that?
Yeah, there's a certain rule that it's the majority of his senior cabinet or something like that. And then that could be overruled by a 2/3 vote. Like they actually wrote it out in the 25th Amendment. But the point is that, like, to my knowledge, that's one of the few ones that people said, hey, we have a loophole here. Like when Reagan was under the gas and Haig was running, even though Bush was running around somewhere, but Haig was running Washington, right? Like they said,
Andrew Haig,
Alexander Haig, right? General
Haig, yeah. I'm in charge.
Who a lot of people assume was Deep Throat, right? A lot of people think Alexander Haig was Deep Throat. So anyway, so my point is, they said, okay, we've got these issues here. Let's do a 25th Amendment just in case something happens where the president is out of it and he doesn't know it yet, and medically, so they took care of it. But ask yourself this: has anyone ever thought of saying, like, let's decide whether a president can pardon himself. Let's decide that if a president has Alzheimer's, he needs to have something to be removed. To you guys' point, why don't we make it mandatory? Full medical, which they do now at Walter Reed, but part of that has to be a cognitive test with 3 independent neurologists, and their majority decision goes, right? We don't see any of that. We don't see a lot of these things, right? So, for example, why isn't it law that a president has to reveal all his financial holdings?
John,
that doesn't happen.
That's an easy answer.
Oh, I know it's easy.
Why didn't they install seatbelts on cars when they were first created? Why didn't they
cost?
No. Well, that was part of it. But the point is, people don't think of why didn't they install? Why TSA was created because of 9/11. It's like it's human nature. It's bad things will trigger.
Right.
And here's the best one.
What I'm saying is,
here's the best one. Here's the best one for the audience. Man, we need a traffic light here. Somebody's going to get killed. 5 deaths later. Oh, hell, man, people die. We better get a traffic light. So that's why, John. But to your point, we're in a different era. And now politics has elevated itself. Generally speaking, it's like the ugly man's Hollywood. Hollywood being all the pretty people, all that. Right. But because of the way people take sides, it's that. So people are more aware. So that could force something to happen. Will it? Unlikely, because as Big John says, it's divided by party line. The Democrats would look at this and say, we're not going to throw Joe Biden or his people under the bus. Even we're not going to ruin his legacy. Because what are the Democrats saying right now? That's behind us. We're looking at the future.
But that's not to protect Joe. That's not to protect Joe. That's to protect themselves. They don't want to litigate that they were part of the cover-up. That's why they're saying what was it?
Oh, no, G, hold on. He's been there for 40 years. There is some loyalty to his legacy. You know, the younger.
Not at this point. Not at this point. They're like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that.
No, it's the media. It's the media. The media saying that they fooled us. They lied to us. But who's the congressman from South Carolina that got all the Biden stuff rolling? He was just interviewed. Clyburn. He was just interviewed. Oh, he looked good to me. I didn't know, man. He fooled me. He got me. He got me. You know. So the Democrat Party itself is saying, let's move forward. The mainstream media is using the book to go, he fooled us. But nobody has come out and thrown him under the bus except for Jake Tapper, a couple others, and more forceful people in the media. But even the media is like, they fooled us. So they're blaming Biden. But the Democrat Party itself is not. Because you know why? They could be in that position one day. And they don't want to piss off Biden donors who supported him. It's a whole intricacy. It's like a damn soap opera, you know.
So let's move on to segment 3 because you just brought it up and it was a great segue. So Original Sin describes June 27th, the debate moderated by Tapper and Dana Bash as the moment that Biden's decline became undeniable, not only to those two, but all of America, especially those who their lying eyes are fooling them or don't believe your lying eyes, but is that the saying? But he had halting speech, mental freezes, confusion. And Tapper, in the book, he basically says, I find it disturbing. I wonder if he can endure this whole 90 minutes. I mean, he actually had a come to Jesus moment there, which I think it's funny. Whoa. This book's called Original Sin. Exactly. So my question to you guys, and I find this interesting, that was June 27th, right? So that's 11 months ago that he finds us out. Now he says something. Now he writes the book. Now he releases it. There was a whole campaign where he could have been nightly like, is Biden mentally fit? Is Biden this? Is Biden that? I mean, he could have actually talked about this. And if you look at Jon Stewart's video, which I referenced earlier, Jon Stewart's saying, wait a minute, you could have reported on this news for free a year ago, but now you sit on it for a whole year and you make us pay for it. And of course, I'm not a comedian, right? But that was, I mean, the left is eating their own right now because there's truth to that, right? Why did Tapper sit on it? Now, I want to find out your guys' opinion. Why did Tapper sit on it? Why didn't he talk about it during the election? Is it, again, anybody but Trump? Let's try to get Kamala Harris elected. What do you guys think? Let's start with John.
Oh, okay.
John.
Yeah, look, why we could do a litany of people who knew better and decided not to act, right? There's a lot of that. A lot of it is courage or the lack thereof. A lot of it is an ulterior motive, right? Like, so was Tapper afraid that if he spoke out against the wishes of, say, his program director or his editors, that he would be fired? He'd lose his job? Perhaps. You know, I don't much care for Tucker Carlson, but the one thing I won't deny him is he risked his job. He put it on the line to leave Fox News when they told him basically clam up about what we have to tell you. Whether he was right or wrong, I'm not even judging that, but he said, I'm going to start my own stuff on X. I'm going to partner up with Elon. I'll say what I want to say. And I don't even care what he's saying, but that takes guts. And he put it on the line and he did it. But that's extraordinary. Like, the more typical response is, I'll toe the line because I'm earning a good living. I'm on TV every night. You know, I'm getting women or whatever he gets. I don't know. But why put that on the line for Joe Biden? Why put that on the line for, Joe Plumber? Why would I do that for them? And that, to me, sounds like a very typical response. The atypical response is what we saw Tucker Carlson do, or Joe Rogan, for example, when he was attacked. So when you're asking why, G, I think look for the simplest answer. Occam's razor. What's the simplest answer that explains it all? He didn't want to lose his stuff. He liked what he has, so he wanted to keep it. I think that's the most obvious answer.
Yeah. William, what's your take? In terms of, okay, so why did Jake Tapper stay relatively silent for almost a whole year? And let's say 6 months, right? Because I would say maybe the last 5 months he's been working on this book, so maybe he doesn't want to talk about it because Jon Stewart again was showing all these clips of him promoting his book on CNN, saying in 1 week and 2 days you're going to be able to buy this book. So why did he sit on it for, let's say, 7 months, from June to December?
Okay, so I can't remember. I was trying to look it up as Big John was talking, but I started railing on this some years back. There was another reporter who held the info, didn't report it. You know, I think Bob Woodward and Bernstein are the two most overrated reporters in the history. Their whole lives and careers have been made because Deep Throat reached out to them. You know, but in their defense, what did they did? They went to their editor. We got the story of the century here. And they started, the Washington Post flew up the charts in respectability on that daily reporting. Media changed once again. They took sides. You cannot say or do anything to hurt our ideological president. And as 92% media, it leans left to the fact we saw it happen. They defend. You know, like I said, if Trump walked on water, they say he's racist towards the H2O community. And the reason I say that is the answer is simple. They were doing everything they could to protect him. Tapper knew what was happening. I don't care. I'm going to protect Biden. Oh, I can write a book about this afterwards and make a big fat paycheck. That's Occam's razor. That's your simplest answer. And in this case, if you put me under oath or put a gun to my head, that's what I would sit there and say. I believe it's that simple. The journalism is not journalism today. Guys, my company was forced to become journalism in sports. We were seniors reporters. We interviewed players. We broke stories. And we did run into the issue. Dude, we only got one source on this. Do we get it out? Do we trust this guy? You know, so you go on those decisions. But honor and integrity, as corny as that sounds, that is the Bible of the reporter. Being unbiased, having integrity, and being honorable to all sides. Now, I throw in the honorable because that's just how I look at life. But integrity and being unbiased, and that's no longer part of journalism. So what Jake Tapper did does not shock me, and that's why I'm so angry. I'm like, you are the flagship video is that Laura Trump one to denigrate her because he was all in on the cover up. I mean, did you guys see the Joe Scarborough one? On my last podcast, I think we put it on the clip, you know. And then at the end, people are like, remember, take it to the bank and F off if you don't believe me. But even at the end, and you know, I've known Joe Biden for like, I don't know, 15, 30, 40 years or whatever he said. And
15 years, yeah.
And the Brzezinski's much longer. So the lie was in. Now it's a cover up for the media and the blame Trump. So I kind of like that. I think that's like the second or third time I've heard it this week. Look at Occam's razor. Is that what it is? Occam's razor? Yeah. And to me, that's the easiest. Gonna defend Biden to the end. Oh, he's toast. I got out my notes where I know this, you know. And then he lied. Megyn Kelly goes, oh, they don't like me. They don't like me. Then how the hell did you get 200 people to come talk to you? And the other thing I'm digressing, but what irks me too is like you give people credit where it's due. His co-author, I can't even remember his last name, Alex, the Axios guy. He's the one who'd been talking about this. He was the only reporter who'd been talking about this from before the election. You know, hey, what do you think? And remember is it Rosenbaum, James Rosenblum or James Rosenbaum? When he asked the Biden camp about the mental, they banned him. So to John's point, there was a little fear in this. But when you have your editorial board on your side and your company's backing you, the power of the pen is mightier than any government. The problem is that's no longer the case. But Jake Tapper, you could argue.
Do we lose him?
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
there we go.
He's back. Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Jake Tapper. I mean, he wanted to see Kamala Harris to be president, or at least not see President Trump, and then he would do the tell-all, right? But I think he knew a long time. And in the book, of course, he's going to say it was at a later date. Of course, he's going to say it's at the same time as 320 million other Americans. That's when I realized, because of course he doesn't have any access. And Megyn Kelly recently, what was it, last week, called him to task on that and said, look, Megyn talking, I don't have access to Biden. I have access to Trump. But you, Jake Tapper, you have access to Biden, and you're telling me you didn't see a thing. And Tapper was on the defensive during that whole podcast. And to me, it calls into question. In the book, he says, I found out during the debate. Can he make it through this 90 minutes? Something's wrong. I'm like, no, he knew. I think he knew. I think he was hoping that Biden could make it through, that he would get jacked up like the State of the Union. And, Joe Scarborough, poor guy's been dragged through the mud with his own words, but deservedly, because he said, take it to the bank. This is the best Biden ever. And I've seen that clip so many times on YouTube shorts by other people. And it's like, this guy was lying. Or I think actually they followed up with him and they said, okay, why'd you say
Yes.
that? Clearly he was not. And he goes, well, Biden has his good days and his bad days. I must have met him on his good day. Like, okay.
Oh, he was called out for that, G. He says, no, I never saw that. He goes, no, you saw him call out for the dead woman. You saw him here. And Scarborough was like, well, yeah, I did. And but.
I don't watch the news much or something. I'm just joking there. But I mean, the guy's a news guy, but the MSDNC, right? That's what Trump calls it. I mean, they basically parrot the Democratic talking points. And so Biden team gave them, hey, he's just a stutter, gaslight the American public and say, no, doesn't have a mental decline. It's just a stutter. And if you're making fun of him, you're making fun of a guy who's been stuttering since he was 5 years old. Think of a 5-year-old kid stuttering. Is that what you want to do? And so we gaslit the American public, and that was wrong. But now they're gaslighting us again, right? So moving on to the next thing, Jake Tapper's book was supposed to come out this past Tuesday. What date was that? The 20th. And what was it, on Saturday or Sunday? Biden comes out with, hey, stage 4 prostate cancer.
Can't laugh.
Well, no, we're not laughing because of the cancer. We're just laughing because of the timing, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
right. So again, and I'm going to reiterate what I said in the beginning. We hope he makes it through and has many more years of living, and we don't want anyone to die of cancer. But at the same time, you don't get Gleason 9 stage 4 cancer in 4 months. It just doesn't happen. Even on MSNBC, or was it CNN, one of those two networks, they had different doctors saying, no, this kind of cancer takes 5 to 7 years to metastasize. So to go from stage 3 to stage 4, it takes 5 to 7 years. So what's your guys thinking? Is the timing just coincidence, or do you think that there was a bigger thing at play? Do you think Biden knew that this book was coming out and they need to stop the conversation?
Before you answer, John G, let's add to that the medication that is prescribed for that type of cancer can also
go into detail on
fog brain. So that was the other issue. So it kind of like you can never prove this, but in Murder, She Wrote, Angela Lansbury would piece together, boom, 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 and on television we proved that you're guilty. In real life, you have all that evidence. I mean, you have all that information, but there's no actual evidence. So I believe one theory is that it did, and I believe the doctors. So I believe in the potential treatment, and I say I believe because we don't know, but I believe what happened. They found it. They started giving this drug that's supposedly the best drug to treat this, and the brain fog started setting in quicker. And maybe he was off the drug there for his State of the Union speech for a week or two. To get that brain cleared up. But I think, and I was chuckling, not at Biden. And I'll be honest, guys, and I don't mean to sound mean. I'm indifferent to everybody unless it's somebody I attach with. Like, he's led a long life. He's in his 80s, But I want to point out, he's a vile, evil man. 13, I don't care about the politics, but when you get the average American, and whether you agree with the military, what we do or not, those kids are dependent on their government, at least not putting them in harm's way. And 13 Americans were put in harm's way. So I kind of find out, we wish this, we wish that, good this, that. Where was all this for those, for Lake and Riley, or these 13 Americans? So I kind of get irked at that, But the point is I think this was purposely dropped because the book was coming out. It did not quite work. I think he didn't help himself when he went on The View and other outlets. And Jill is smart. She knew when to cut in. She knew when to. And she before that happened, she cut in right at the moment, but it didn't help him. And I think this was nothing but to deflect, because what are Democrats saying? Axelrod came out and said, regardless of what you think of the issues that he's facing with whatever it was, we can't be harsh on him. He has a grade for prostate cancer and the Gleason scale of a 9. So we got and a couple others have said that. So that's what the Bidens were hoping to get out of it. But I think he's had this. If it's true, he had this probably as early or before the start of the presidency. And again, they hid this. Everybody talks HIPAA. F you. If you want to be the president, it's like when I joined the military, a lot of those constitutional rights, and I don't know if either one of you served, out the window. We are owned by the military. You will do that's against the Constitution. That's way when you're in the military. The president is what? The commander in chief. Now, that stated our records are still protected, medically and all that. But HIPAA be damned. He's representing the country. And to avoid this in the future, I think that has to be public. And you have to find honest. Look, I'm going to be the first one. I cracked up when the leftists just lost it on Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Trump version, which when his fitness report came out. But we need some honest medical reporting, and none of this will be the issue. So we'll never know. But I believe they hid it from us, and they dropped the story this week to deflect the Tapper. And I don't think it has worked. I think the Tapper book, actually, maybe it has. The Tapper book is only being talked about on leftist outlets, and conservatives are bringing it up from the perspective, you knew, they lied, we need an investigation. But I don't know how much the masses are hearing this.
So, Big John, same question to you, but also with the idea that didn't this backfire on them? Didn't it just highlight that now there's another thing they covered up, not only the mental decline, or at least maybe the mental fog, but now they hid cancer, and the doctor might be complicit as well.
Yeah, it's not a good look. Now, because we don't know his medical history, I will throw a caveat in. While you got
John, too. He had 2 aneurysms. Sorry. I forgot that, but
yeah,
remember that.
The thing specifically with prostate cancer is, you guys are right. Typically, prostate cancer is one of the slowest growing cancers. And that's why if you catch it early enough, it's typically very treatable. In some cases, it could be like 10, 12 years that you're living with prostate cancer. So typically, but there is a small percentage that's this super aggressive, highly accelerated cancer. I think the statistic I read is somewhere in like 15 to 30% of the cases, like you see this type of thing, which doesn't have that typical progression. So I don't know, but typically speaking, he probably had some indication of it. Now, that's not to say that it was debilitating in and of itself, right? To the extent that, let's say he was diagnosed or either before he took office or while in office, it's not necessarily a condition that debilitates you mentally, even with those drugs. Because typically, I think they said that the best therapy I think I read was hormonal treatment for him, right? So typically that stuff doesn't incapacitate you. But we don't know. But yeah, see, I would tend to agree with you. But again, unless the Congress gets together and rises above its partisanship, there's a whole slew of these things that should be codified, right? The annual physical, right? The neurological exam should be part of it, and it shouldn't be like, is this a picture of an elephant or something, like what Trump brags about, right? Like, it should really be the test that, like, if I took my mother in, if I was worried about her cognitive abilities, that, the test they give her, or they give anybody else, that should, at least that level should be given to the president on an annual basis. Or if you want to put some gradation on it, like when you hit 70, it's this often. When you hit 80, it's this often, right?
No.
That should be codified. We should codify a lot of things. Financial disclosure should be codified. It's not. The health thing, definitely. What is the process outside the 25th Amendment? what level of staff work is acceptable? See, a lot of these you're never going to codify, right? Because what is the right, like you guys said, some of the best presidents couldn't tell you anything about policy, right? Like Reagan said, I believe in free trade. Milton Friedman, you figure it out, right?
Right.
Yeah, but that's
Well,
how,
no,
but that's
but
how
I'm
that
saying,
goes. But
right,
at the end of the
you can't
day,
codify that. You can't codify that, is what I'm saying.
right? No, you're right. Oh yes,
Right.
yes, you're right. You're right. Because it's a
Right.
matter of how they run their
Certain
philosophical
things,
ways.
but certain things should be codified. The health thing, like you said, if you want to run the country, you have to make certain sacrifices. Yeah, I would fight to the death to say no one should have access to my medical records that I do not authorize, right? However, if you choose willingly to be president, I would even go so far as to say to be an official candidate for president, maybe those health records need to be made public.
Oh yeah.
Maybe if you choose to run for president willingly, you need to disclose all your finances, all your holdings, 7 years of your tax returns, the whole 9 yards. The stuff that was being done voluntarily by a lot of candidates should be codified as being mandatory. I'm always reminded when Howard Stern in New York ran for governor in the 80s, there was solid evidence that he was close to winning. What drove him out of the race, at least allegedly, was that they told him, you have to disclose your finances. And he said, I'm not doing that for anybody. And he fell out of the race rather than disclose his finances. So what I'm trying to say is, William, you're absolutely right. A lot of this should be codified. I agree with you. And it goes back to our earlier points, not just about health, not just about finance, but about the Constitution has loopholes in it. And while we hope that people will be scrupulous enough not to exploit them, we already know they will, right? So regardless of party, we know they will. So let's to the extent that we can, your example of the traffic light notwithstanding, William, let's not wait for the accident. We kind of see some of these.
Well, the accidents
needs.
happen, John. Biden's the accident.
Yes, in that particular case, you're absolutely right. So yeah, let's codify it. That's what I'm saying. Let's codify it. Let's not wait for the incompetent president with access to the nuclear codes. Let's not wait for that, right?
No,
So-
I totally agree with you
accident.
because I think they're now saying that Biden had no PSA test since 2014. Yet in 2022, he was out on doing a speech, and he said that's why I and other people have cancer. Now, whether that was a misspeak or whatnot, I don't believe it was. I think he knew he had cancer and he misspoke, revealing the truth, not misspeaking and saying something wrong. So
I probably
I
would
think he
agree
was
with
having
you. Yeah.
PSA. Yeah, I think he was having PSA tests, but it was by another doctor and he was hiding it, right? So I think there was something going on and they were sitting on this. And yeah, I can't
Well-
imagine that a White House doctor would say, you don't need to take a $10 test because you're over
Well,
70 years old. No, you're the
you're right.
president of the United States. You need
No,
to take
Oh,
this.
exactly. You're
I-
better, boy.
I agree with you. I agree with you. But to your point, it's not normal procedure to have a PSA test once you hit 70.
But no, that it's not the doctor doesn't recommend it anymore, but
Right,
you can still
right.
ask for it. Yeah, that's a
Absolutely.
distinction.
Yes, absolutely. You can ask for it
mean-
and get it, but it's not standard check off the list like a
Right.
colonoscopy is. So I agree with you. But to your point, look, if you ask me to bet on it just on probability, I would say he probably had the early stages of this in office at the very least.
Right, and that he knew about it.
I given your example that you just cited, which a lot of people have, probably.
Well, hold on. You mean the prostate cancer?
Yeah, that he knew he had it while he was in office.
Well, here's the other thing: the hormonal thing. I can't remember, one of these bigwig doctors was on Megyn Kelly, and I mean he's one of these legit doctors. Said you can't. The way they phrased it, you can't say that unless you've already known and you've been doing things already to deal with it. They say it's responding to hormonal therapy. So that in and of itself is kind of like a smoking gun. And Big John, going back to you say, I can see taxes not being codified, but I can see incidents like this pushing nobody to get codified. You got a lot of younger people in Congress now. The old ones are aging out. Durbin's going by the wayside. McConnell. Now's the perfect time because at the end of the day, we've all seen dementia, but I worked in that industry, and I keep trying to tell people that's our next epidemic because when I was still in the industry at the time, it's like breast cancer, which has literally been not cured, but it's become such a non-factor in terms of the way they can prevent it, deal with it, and all that. It's an NIH, I think. They were still funding like 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 some odd billion for it. And there's the NFL still doing their purple stuff. And then here's Alzheimer's, like 4 billion.
Pink. It was pink. But
yeah, pink.
I
here's
get
Alzheimer's, 4 billion with the NIH. Everybody hides it. One of the greatest epidemics coming, and it's culminated in Joe Biden. And again, Joe Biden's a vile, evil man. What happens to him is in God's hands. But I care about the fact that it shouldn't have happened. I mean, why did he campaign from his basement? I mean, COVID. I mean, we've learned a lot of truth about COVID.
Jake Tapper actually says that helped him win because these things didn't come to light, and he would have had so many more gaffes if he wasn't hiding out in the basement.
But and think of this though. In Biden's defense, he's a well-known liar at worst, uber super duper on steroid exaggerator, and that's what they said when the cancer thing. Joe's always trying to say he's part of this or part of that. It's just Biden being Biden. Now we look back, and the greatest secret is those weren't gas. They just showed how dumb he is. I'm kidding on that, but the point is his greatest defense was one of his worst traits as a human being, a liar.
Right. Yeah. So let's any last thoughts on this topic, Big John?
No, I don't have too many thoughts. I think we've exhausted it all. And I'm actually with you guys on this, even if I'm typically against Trump. This one was so obvious. I said it in real time as it was happening. It was obvious to the American public as well. And I think a lot of what, aside from their policies, this was probably the largest single reason why the Democrats got crushed or lost is because they weren't upfront with the American people. And then when they should have had a convention to pick the replacement for Biden on the ticket, whether he did it purposely or not, he kind of handed it to Harris. And that brought up the additional memories of the way they treated Bernie. So I think it was botched from the start, and whoever they had as paid consultants to them who gave them that advice should never work again, because it was a colossal mistake that I think any one of us, even if you went along with the Biden deception, after that initial, after he appeared lost on TV, it should have been, I'm resigning for the good of the country. Get some value back out of it. I'm resigning for the good of the country. Vice President Harris will take over to finish out this term. And because I had gotten the nomination, and now this money is tied up and all that, we're going to have it decided at the convention, old school style, like in the 19th century. We're going to have all the delegates, all whatever thousands of them exist, show up on the convention floor, and they'll pick the nominee, because that is the appropriate way to do this. And they did not do that. And everyone, even Democrats, knew it, right? Because if you're a Democrat and you're an AOC supporter, if you're any other type of person, a Bernie bro, you were like, let's get to the floor. And they screwed that up too. They gave it to us. Listen, on my show when I had Larry Sharp on, and we were talking about this, he said, John, the only way the Democrats can salvage this is if they go to the floor and they pick Michelle Obama. That is the only way they're going to pull this out of the fire at this point. He goes, I guarantee you, if it's going to be Harris, they will not even win the black vote. And he's a black man, in case people don't know. Right. Larry Sharp ran for governor of New York. He's a black man, and he said, "There's."
Are you saying Larry's a little light there?
No, what I mean,
he's my version of Latino for the black man.
So yeah, and basically, even Larry Sharp said, John, there is not a single black man in this country that likes Kamala Harris, and he was upfront about that, and he turned out being very right. Oh, and we have a comment. Hody says, oh no, I lost Big John to the conservatives talk show. No, okay,
Hody. So we have two more topics coming up. They're smaller topics, but John will find his way home in those two topics, I'm
Okay.
sure, on the other side of William and I. But William, do you have any last words on this topic?
I was trying to remember. I can't remember. There was like a 70s commercial that was a glamour commercial for perfume. It was like, who's that girl? And it was like Shelly Hack. And it's like, Chanel. It's like when Biden started to lose it, and now that was Gavin Newsom. Who's that man? Newsom. Because he thought he was going to be the man. And Big John's right. Jill Biden did not like Kamala. Does not like Kamala Harris, and Biden, I don't think is in care for her. But they were pissed, and everything John said was going to happen. They were going to pick their person, and he said, "F off." I endorse Kamala. Who? I mean, that was masterstroke. Black woman, a woman. If you went against her, you win everything the Democrat Party has been preaching since Obama got elected. So that was the deal. What I'm grateful for is what we avoided. If Biden had been elected, he would have been in a wheelchair because of his degenerative spine. We didn't talk about that, but part of the report is he had degenerative spine. He would have been incapacitated. He would have been forced to resign, and we would have, and it set the Democrats up perfectly. A woman and a black woman, so they get the first wins, because Republicans have kind of owned the first ofs for a lot of things. So I am glad we avoided, but we never talked about it, guys, and it's Gee's show. But who was running because John, it triggered in my head when you said he should have resigned. Who? And that's why the investigation should take place. Who? And the book is the evidence. 200 witnesses. They can be subpoenaed brought into court if they can track who some of them are. But who was running the country for the last 6 months? It wasn't Joe Biden, based off what we saw. But I'm just grateful for what we avoided. And it has nothing to do with Kamala being a woman, Kamala being a black. It has to her proving anybody can become a lawyer in America and be dumb as a rock. Kamala's not dumb. She's just not politically savvy. She's her own worst enemy. But I'm glad we avoided all of that. But I do want to know, and I do believe we need an investigation, who was running the country the last 6 months. That's a serious, and I'm not saying that for politics, but Americans need to know so we can avoid it.
Yeah, that's definitely a great topic for a future show that we should, dig more deeply into that. So we have a couple comments by Hody Johns.
Partner in crime.
If Biden got, just kidding. I got love for you all. Believe me, I've got nothing good to say about Kamala Harris. She was last place in her own primary for darn good reason, which is perplexing that Joe Biden would ever pick her, except for James Clyburn from South Carolina. And if Biden got elected, we would have had Joe Biden in any condition that's bad enough. So, yeah, I mean, it's been bad. And again, this is bigger than Watergate, in my opinion, because of the ramification. A third-rate burglary with a cover-up, okay, now you have a corrupt president. But because of Biden's decline, we could probably have avoided the Russia-Ukraine war. We could have avoided a lot of murders in America because the border would have been more secure, maybe not completely secure, but more secure, but it was just left wide open. And again, I'm with you, William. Like, I don't think Biden was paying attention, making any decision. And somebody said, Kamala, you go down there, but she's a way left liberal and she's doing nothing down there. And, cackling with Lester Holt saying, well, I haven't been to Europe either. So, why should I go down to the border? But I think we've beaten this one to death. I think it's been an interesting year for sure. The most incredible presidential race since 1968 for sure. And it's just like boom, boom, boom. Every month there's just a new headline. But let's move on to the next two topics. And these are going to be like hot takes plus. So we could spend a little time on them. But not not 3 minutes like a usual hot take. So the first one, I'll go with the credit rating first because we'll go to Epstein second. So the credit rating, we have Moody's downgrading us to what is it, double A, right? Big John?
One double A. It's the second highest.
Okay, so that's a downgrade. Now it happened under Trump. Now we know things don't happen in 4 months to cause that. We had our first downgrade in S&P back in It was 2012. So the S&P ratings agency dropped us in
And
2012.
Fitch. So Moody's,
Fitch in 2020,
yeah. So
2023.
all three of the major credit rating agencies have now downgraded sovereign U.S. debt. Yes.
Yeah. So my question to you, and we'll start with Big John, is what effect does this have on us? Does it really have an effect? Because we thought the sky is falling 2012. That was 13 years ago. Does this have an effect in the immediate term? Because we know all the massive government deficits will have an effect in the long term, but I'm talking in the short term. Let's say the next 3 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to segue into a promo for my show, Liberty Lens, where Mike Termott and I actually did a 1-hour deep dive on just this. So I'll spare you the hour, but I'll give you the highlights. Downgrading sovereign debt is a very big deal because the United States, our debt, our treasuries, our bonds have always been considered the safest monetary instrument on the planet. Other countries,
Since we got off the gold standard. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, since 73. Here's the thing, though. Other countries hold our debt, right? Now, when we issue new debt, it's to repay our current debt, right? So when you get a reduction in credit rating, you have to understand what that means. That means investors demand a higher rate of return to compensate you for the increased risk. Now, let's keep things in perspective. Increased risk means, in this case, we went from 0 to 5% for credit default, right? And while, yes, Trump is only 4 months into his administration, part of the reason Moody's decided to downgrade us now is because of Trump's policies. Not entirely, but that's part of it, right? It's the combination of tax cuts and increased spending. It's the combination of the political instability that his trade policies bring. And the reason it's a big deal is because Scott Bessent, the Soros-trained hedge fund manager, felt it necessary to make the rounds on the Sunday news show saying, this is no big deal. Thou doth protest too much, in my opinion. So when the Secretary of the Treasury, who, by the way, if you think about it, is the CEO of the company that issues that debt, that's the guy they chose to go on TV and say, nothing to see here. There's something to see there. It's bad. And what makes it even worse, combined with the skyrocketing debt, especially if the one big, beautiful or bloated bill, depending on your point of view, actually goes through the Senate, the debt gets even worse. Despite what Trump and baby girl Carolyn are saying, the debt will get worse. So Moody's looks at all this and says, you know what? Even though it's a small possibility, there is a possibility that the United States will not be able to repay some of its obligations. FYI, how do we know this? Because President Trump has often stated, it doesn't matter how much we go in debt because we owe the money to ourselves. We don't have to pay ourselves back if we don't want to. I'm not making this up. Look it up yourselves.
Yeah, instead of 8 years ago, 10 years ago.
So that means that's in his thoughts, and he hasn't changed any of his policies.
You don't have no proof. Okay, I'm going to stop, but you don't have any proof. You're a mind reader now. So go ahead.
No, I agree with you, William, that he could have changed his mind. He just hasn't articulated it yet. But Big John, do you have any further thought on that?
So based on public comments, and you're right, maybe all of a sudden he's become a free marketeer. No, because nobody believes that. But based on his public comments, Moody's says, look, we can't in good conscience say the U.S. deserves the top credit rating. And Moody's was the last holdout, by the way. For those that might think it was politically motivated, they're the last holdout. They were the last holdout. The other two agencies already downgraded, once under Obama and then again under Trump. They already downgraded U.S. sovereign debt. So it is what it is. People have to wake up and smell the coffee. People need to be, and I'm sorry, G, you said what's the immediate effect? The immediate effect is the U.S. has to pay higher interest rates. So when this was announced, you already saw the 10-year tick over 5%. Now it ticked underneath again, but it just means that on average, it's going to cost more in interest payments for the U.S. to meet its obligations as we go forward.
All right. So, William, your take.
Well,
Credit
first of all,
rating.
everything
Yeah.
John said is speculative, just as everything I'm going to say is speculative. It is. We don't know what's going to happen. And for the record, May 5th, 2025, Trump proposed a skinny budget plan aimed at reducing non-defense discretionary spending. His tax bill is supposed to bring in $3.8 trillion. Again, I could do like John did and say it as fact, but we don't know. These are formulas. These are thoughts. This is big time thinking with the people who have done it before. Scott Bessent. I was not a Scott Bessent fan until recently because he was a Soros guy. I'm like, that's a Soros guy, you know. And
He still is.
anybody's going to make the rounds when something like this happens. That's politics. It's nothing special. Nothing. Every U.S. secretary. A lot of factors went to this drop, including the fact that Moody said, "Well, the tax cuts is going to increase trillion." Well, as G and I predicted, what's happening is happening. We're still in the third inning of this. This is not a good thing, but this has been building off the freaking debt. And it's like, I just retweeted Big John's new friend here. I can't pronounce his last name. I apologize, John, the chair.
Stephen Nikela.
Stephen Nikela. I agree with him. You know, you got to start reducing the freaking debt, and we're going to add to it. Tax cuts have historically shown they will bring in a higher tax revenue. But my fear is, like, we're blowing so much money, we could bring in monster tax revenues, and it's not going to be enough. So that's when I get on Massey's side. That's when I get on Rand Paul's side. That's when I get on Ron Johnson's side right now. We gotta cut back this deficit, and I think Trump is oblivious to it. Even though, like I just proved John wrong, he has talked about getting that deficit down. But the point is I have to agree with John in this sense. I don't agree with him in terms of what Trump said, but I look at Trump's actions. And he has not made any action since being president to lower the debt. So whoever he's talking to is giving him bad info. But that said, with Scott Bessent on hand, I'm like, nobody even thought about our rating, but somebody should have. And I'm sure maybe they did. Hey, we could lose some of our rating here if this happens or this happens. But I'm a believer right now in what Scott Bessent is doing, and I want to see it play out. But we better get a grip on this deficit, because I love Trump to death, and I'll defend him to death. And I was a TDSer at 2015. You know, so Trump won me over. But we keep blowing this freaking debt off, and people are like, well, I don't see it. You don't see it. You see it in not being able to afford a home. You know, exorbitant, all that. You know, the defense building. I'm a big pro-America guy in the sense. What's that Ronald Reagan saying? The strong defense. Keeps people in check. But there comes a point. It's not defense, but it falls under Boeing. We're getting a U.S. Air Force One, a fleet. They're saying may not be done for 20 years. It's like everything's bloated. The American taxpayer has become these behemoths gravy train, and we have to stop that. So this rating does not bother me, and I think some of it is politically motivated in terms by Moody's explanation of the tax cuts are going to, they remind me of the OAG. You know, they're looking at static. The tax cuts are going to create this much debt. Well, how much are they going to bring in? Look at history. Whether you like it or not, supply side economics may have been an outlier, but it worked. You know, so you can't sit there saying that's not going to work. It worked.
It worked until they increased the deficit. So that's the other part.
There you go. And that's my point is we're not going to be able to bring in enough taxes to cover that. So that does concern me. But Moody's completely wrong and say the tax cuts are going to add. No, it's the freaking spending that's going to add. So absolutely. I'm quasi in agreement with John, but for different reasons. But we come to the same conclusion at the end of the day.
Right.
Well,
let me just throw in one last nerdy economic point, because William, I disagree with him, but we got to the same point, so I'm not going to argue with him. The U.S. dollar, since Trump took office in 2016, and of course this also covers the Biden administration, but since 2016, the U.S. dollar has lost 25% of its purchasing power. And I don't think the average American understands how that happens. That happens because you're constantly printing money and you're constantly spending more than you come in. GDP. By the way,
See, John said it in a better way. I said it by the house.
Yeah.
You can't afford a house. You can't afford this because
Yeah,
we're losing the value of the dollar.
GDP spending is 122% of GDP. And some people erroneously say, well, that means we spend 22 more cents per dollar that we take in. Wrong. We spend 22 more cents per dollar than the entire economy makes. That's what GDP means. If you're talking about federal revenue, it's even worse, right? Because the government then they have non-discretionary spending, and that number could only go up. So whether you think it's political or not doesn't matter. And I'll also throw in.
No, Moody. I'm talking about Moody's reasoning that they said because of tax cuts.
It was tax cuts, but more it was driven by the combination of tax cuts with increased spending. Like you could have tax cuts. Nobody.
Yes, no, you're right. Yes. Which is
the comments. There's two comments by Hody Johns.
Okay, so Hody. By the way, for those who don't know, Hody is also my co-host for Free for All.
Hody's a good guy. If you don't like Hody,
guys
there's
who
something wrong
wrote Bill,
with you.
this will run up 20 trillion in debt. Moody's responds by downgrading our rating. Guys who passed the bill surprise Pikachu face, and I'm sure we've all seen that meme.
But my issue with this is I don't fully put this. I said I don't know if I said this off camera.
Let me read the comment real quick. He is definitely talking about balancing the budget, meaning Trump promised it to do year one. Can't wait for that promise to be fulfilled.
Yeah, that'll never happen. Every candidate.
And I'll agree with William a bit here.
last.
Trump decreased taxes pre-tariff in term one. Revenue went up.
Yeah.
Right. But I just think at the end of the day, and I don't blame Trump. I don't blame any president. Our Congress has become so fat and bloated with their personal freaking income war chest and because of donors that you take any bill and you're going to end up with a bloated freaking budget because nobody in Congress is going to go along. And what's that resulted when it hasn't? We had continuing resolution for years. I guess I see this sickens me because there's no one party at fault. This is where the libertarian government comes out. It's freaking bloated ass
I will tell you,
government.
I was I remember year 2000. We're all singles hanging out. We were all college buddies, and we were 4 years out of college. And we were talking about the Bush-Gore election. And I remember Thanksgiving and Christmas, that time frame was so contentious because my Democrat friends are saying, we can't have another Republican in office. They're going to drive the deficits up. And both parties are doing it now. It doesn't matter. It's just, you're talking, okay, Republicans doing it using a choo-choo train, and Democrats are doing it using a Concorde jet. Choose your vehicle of choice, but it's happening. And thank you, Hody Johns. I'm speaking the truth, and both sides are doing it. But I will say, this round of tax cuts is just continuing the term one Trump tax cuts, right? With some additions. So they are adding higher SALT limits and whatnot, and those things are being negotiated. And I believe they're doing no tax on overtime and tips. I think that's in there as well.
As temporary tax relief, yeah.
Right, up until 2028, right? So, but I don't get the increased spending thing. They just spent all this time cutting using Doge, and all hell broke loose. And
No. Wait a second. Let me correct you, G. They didn't actually cut anything with Doge, which is why Elon Musk is frustrated and announced the other day at some forum that he's backing off of politics and he's not putting any more of his money into politics because he sees no reason to. So this is, if you guys recall, I think you had me on a couple of weeks ago, and I said I think Elon should quit because he's not built for politics. Politics is not the same as running a company. For Elon's company, what he says goes. He doesn't need to get consensus. He gets his decision, he makes it. Government doesn't work that way. And he learned that the hard way right now. And
explain why there was no cuts.
Because, well, first of all, there were no cuts because no congressman, no senator wants to go back to their constituents and say, I stood on principle and got you nothing from Washington.
Yeah, but that's a big general thing. A lot of Doge cuts will fall into that. Some of them are easier. It can be done through the executive. And we did get a couple. We did get hundreds of millions.
How much is non-discretionary spending of the budget?
Yeah, it's a small amount, but there was a reduction. But yeah.
Well, hold on. This is what irks me, especially with Big John. When you get your budget, man, we're tight. You look the cut here, here, and here, and then you go to the harder stuff. And the government, and so this, it's only 0.01%. It's still cutting the budget. You got to start somewhere. The problem is once you try to get Congress to start codifying this stuff, that's why I get angry. That's where it all ends, and that's why I don't always blame the presidents. It has nothing. It has everything to do with a fat, bloated Congress, and I mean their wallets, through these donors. So they won't codify a lot of these Doge stuff.
I remember we had a hot take 3-4 months ago, and we all agreed, yeah, if we even get to like 10% of the cuts that are promised, that would be amazing.
So Gee, here's a little known fact for you, because I keep working this out, and I've said this for a long time. This goes back to Jack Kemp, who is one of the great economic politicians in a long time. I'll give him credit, even though he wasn't a libertarian. All Congress has to do is freeze spending, not cut. So forget the libertarian in me and Hody, right? Forget us libertarians who want to cut everything, right? If you just kept spending where it is, did not increase it a dime, and just kept it flat, we would have a balanced budget based on the strength of the American economy, because despite what current people may be telling you, we're the biggest economy in the world by a factor of 4. So our economy would balance the budget in 10 to 12 years if we kept spending flat. This is a theory that goes back 25 years, because I remember yelling about this when I was a young lad in college, right? Yeah. So, but we can't even get our congressmen to agree to that, because do you know what they consider a cut? A reduction in the increase of spending. So they'll say, we were planning on increasing this budget 20%. We'll only increase it 10%. Ergo, we had a 10% budget cut. And it is the most duplicitous Orwellian doublespeak I've ever heard of in my life. Yeah. And the American people, to William's earlier point, do not think critically. They are not economically literate. So even where there are points where you could disagree on economic theory, whether you're a Keynesian, a communist, or a free trader, they simply are ignoring the math of it. So when you look at it and you say, like, we haven't had any spending cuts. The last balanced budget we had was under President Clinton. And that's because he couldn't get anywhere with Newt Gingrich running Congress. So literally we had a balanced budget because they couldn't get anything passed.
Oh, that was the whole goal. The Republicans win it. We're going to balance this budget. And Clinton's like, I'll go along with it. And I take credit. Clinton was savvy at that.
Agreed.
Clinton, but real quick, I want to give the audience an example of some of these smaller things, but in essence are hundreds of millions over the years. So Clinton actually solved the problem. Our deficit was growing, and to help balance the budget, he goes, no, welfare is going to start here and here. You know, Obama removed that, took it from a couple months to 6 months and then to a year. So people stop working because it's human nature. And my point is, it's not just the hard numbers, and that's what John likes to do that. I like to do that, but it's also the human effect. People stop. The studies have been done. Yeah, the human person, they're going to stop looking after this much. A year on welfare, they don't have to do a lick. And I start looking around month 8, 9, 10 versus, man, it's month 2 and I'm gonna run out. So I'm ashamed to say, because a friend talked me into it after the military, I got unemployment. There was some kind of thing you get on paperwork, boom, 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 boom. I was ashamed to pick it up, but it ended after a certain thing. And I was actually kind of proud. Thank God that ended. It's just my pride was taking a beating as I cashed those checks after leaving the military. But I felt like that. The average person, man, how can I keep this going? You know, then you have the fraud, all that. So, I mean, we got to start somewhere, but we can't even agree on that. I mean, you can show the studies, and they don't want to go, well, we can't remove it from a year now. I'll lose votes. So they care about, see, again, John, you are absolutely correct, and I agree with you. But this is why we need term limits.
Yeah.
Term limits. I mean, if we get, and I'm tired of people saying, the court saying, well, it's going to fail because the people have to elect it. Well, we got term limits for a damn president. We need to have term limits for Congress, because I'm sorry, human nature. The longer you're in power, what's that saying? Power corrupts, and it corrupts absolutely.
Power corrupts absolutely.
Pelosi, Jeffries, all of these people. So I get angry at this because there is no solution. When people say, well, this is a problem, that's a problem. No, it's big government's the freaking problem.
Right.
That's the problem. So you got to start somewhere, and Doge started somewhere, and they were crapped on. And before Doge could even get out of the starting blocks, Congress keeps shutting them down. The courts is a given. And that's the Republicans' fault for allowing activist judges who don't follow the Constitution but make new law. That's kind of what created our immigration problem, was that, I want to say, the Ninth Circuit judge kind of created a new law by throwing crap together to try to make it work. That's how we got Obamacare. Justin Roberts created saying, oh, no, that's a tax cut. So it's so we got to get away from that. That's a given. But the Congress could end this, but they won't because of everything John said. But it doesn't just start. You got to start somewhere, but we can't even get out of the starting blocks because even Doge cuts. Oh, we can't do that. Can't do that. So we are kind of screwed. What's sad is we're going to be dead. But if this continues, America will be but nothing but a Western Europe. And I promise you, people, I may be dead, but one of these big, mean countries will start to gobble the world up because we're too impotent and too broke to be able to do anything of it. The only thing that will save us will be the fact that we have nuclear weapons, the countries that do, to create some kind of stalemate. But those bad countries will gobble everything else up, every other country that doesn't have a nuclear weapon, or means. And I know I got long-winded, but I just get angry because there's no one answer. No. It's so convoluted. And I'm sorry, it's not going to get solved with Trump. But I hope what Scott Bessent does can get something working. Him and Walter, Lutnick, can do. Because to the audience, whether you guys, let's see, it doesn't matter what you think. It's their actions and what they've actually done. I don't care if they're bad people. I don't care if they're on the right track and they're thinking America first. So be it. We've had a lot of bad people who we've enjoyed, we followed, we liked for whatever reason. I don't like Ron Paul. I know libertarians love him, and I'm not going to say why I don't like him, but they're legit reasons. But the point is their actions and results. And if we can get on track in some form or fashion, that's step one. But even then, I fear that's not.
I mean, just imagine 2028, Kamala Harris gets in, and our credit rating drops to grade C. C meaning cackles, because she likes to laugh. So, but it will take something big like that where you get both sides going, okay, well,
trust me, if that downgrade happens, you're not going to be worried about the economy because it means you've had a total societal collapse. If the U.S. gets downgraded to that, this is what we talked about. If the U.S. Look, my economics professors used to say, U.S. Treasuries have 100% guarantee. And someone like me, perhaps, may have put out the answer and goes, well, can you mathematically guarantee that? And he said, I remember saying, John, if it ever gets to the point that U.S. Treasuries are no longer considered the world's safest investment, you have a lot more to worry about than whether or not you're going to get paid your interest on that treasury, right?
Right, yeah.
So that's what you're worried about. And what you're worried about is, to the point that, I know William went off and he was angry and everything, but here's the bottom line. Unless Congress fixes this, and part of the problem is, if you notice, all these proposals are for 10 years down the road. All the right? Because then that guarantees that no matter who's president, will never be in office when this thing comes due, right? Yep. So that's by design, right? So unless you have a balanced budget amendment, which isn't always perfect. It's like it should be a net zero amendment to the Constitution, meaning the government can't spend more than it takes in under any circumstance. Unless you have something like that, this is going to continue. Because, like we said, nobody knows what goes into these budgets. And then once it does go into the budgets, does anybody actually follow them, right? Like, all of a sudden, I find out that we need a golden dome for the U.S., as if we're like 20 miles wide the way Israel is, right? Now, whether you think that...
Oh, we will eventually need a golden dome based off of technology and these super ballistic missiles. That's legit. I know where you're getting at. Do we have the freaking money and can we afford it? No, they'll bankrupt us, but I'm gonna,
as a host, say we got to get on to our last topic. Because,
thank you, Jee.
We're moving, and I wanted to even go down that thing about balanced budget causing the Great Depression because that forced bad policy. But I won't do it this time. We'll do it in a future show. But let's move on to Epstein.
But real quick, Gee, we did have that with the Graham-Rudman Act, and Congress did away with it.
Future
and then
show.
They tweaked it. Then it was challenged in court.
Future show. So let's talk about Epstein. So we all know who Jeffrey Epstein is. He's a guy who had an island with a bunch of underage girls, and he'd invite many powerful, well-known dignitaries to come, have some fun on the island. And he was found out to have abused these women and girls, and turns out that many of these dignitaries probably have done so as well, which is Epstein's list, right? It's the name of who was there and when and what happened during that time. So Jeffrey Epstein's in jail, and I think this was 2022. And one day he was found dead in jail. So Dan Bongino and Kash Patel said, okay, we're going to get to the bottom of this and find out, because Epstein really didn't kill himself. And now they were interviewed on Fox News last Sunday on May, what would that be? May 18th. And it was they basically said, look, Epstein killed himself. He killed himself. And
Trust
Dan
us.
Bongino said, there's no, people want to find something there. There's no there. So your thoughts on it? Are Dan Bongino and Kash Patel telling the truth, and that they looked at everything and said that Epstein did physically, I'm talking physically, kill himself? Because someone can be manipulated and forced into killing themselves. But are they correct, or are they aiding in the cover up as well? Let's start with well, William had the biggest monologue in the last one, so let's go to Big John first.
Listen, I don't know whether Epstein killed himself or not, but I do know one thing. There's no shame among grifters. And Bonino and Patel were among the most vociferous of Epstein didn't kill himself. Epstein was murdered. Theory du jour over who did it and why they did it. I used to have fun with those people by saying, let's see, there's pictures of Trump and Epstein hanging out together in their past. Trump was president. He could have easily sent in some CIA killers and off to Epstein. Oh, no, you're making stuff up. That's crazy. Yeah, it was crazy of me to say that. Absolutely. But my point was, why are we engaging in this grift? So now when Kash Patel and Dan Bongino get into the FBI, I'm not going to say MAGA, but all of the conspiracy theorists are like, finally, we're going to get that Epstein list. Now, think about the clownish way this was rolled out. First, it was rolled out with the Epstein report, where you had all those right-wing influencers like, who was it? DC Drano and whoever that chick was. They all held up the report.
Insurrection Barbie.
They all held up the report. Yeah, they all held up the report. See, we've got the truth. Well, it turned out there was nothing in there that hadn't been released. Then allegedly stuff was being withheld. Now, take our word for it. That was the key part, because even Bartiromo said, well, what about people who are going to say, we don't believe you? What evidence do you have? What can you show them that says he was, he hung himself? And Bonino, I can't believe he said this. He said, trust me. I know, to the effect of, I could tell when this happened and this didn't happen, right? Well, maybe it did, maybe it did. And I'm not even saying he's lying or not. But why wouldn't you be transparent? Isn't that what you guys made your bones on leading up in this campaign? We're going to be transparent. The FBI is going to be super transparent right now. We're going to get to the bottom of the Epstein, the J6, the informants, the this, the that. What is it now? Is the new grift that we have to give you 4 years for you to figure this out? And then we'll say, well, I'm not in office anymore. I can't tell you what really happened.
But they unequivocally said, in terms of Epstein, he killed himself physically killed himself.
So then,
So
you know
they're not
what?
saying that they don't know. They're saying he didn't. He
Right.
did kill himself.
So, and again, I'm more realistic. I'm willing to take them at their word, right?
Yeah.
But now give me an apology for the grift you were running up until you got into the FBI offices. Apologize to the people for saying, you know what? We fed a lot of these conspiracy theories, and actually we didn't know what we were talking about at that time. Like, at least do that for me. But that's what I feel about it. Now, whether he killed himself or not, I don't know, G. My guess is the simplest answer is probably the right one. He hung himself. Now, he may have been pressured to doing so. If he was truly an Israeli asset or whatever the other theories are, they may have said, like, hey, if you've got any family, you better decide, like the old Frankie Five Angels in The Godfather, right? Like,
right. So that's why I draw the distinction between physically, because it's like, hey, look, you're either going to die by the blue pill or the red pill, right? Take one of these, or here's the hemlock. You're going to do this, or we know where your family lives. Absolutely. I mean, I think there could be credence to that, but that's unprovable. That's going to be way too hard to prove. Let's move to William. What do you think? Dan Bongino and Kash Patel
John,
telling the
John
truth.
loves this is when the TDS side version of John, the grift, they all grift. Whether it's a libertarian, I could run the gamut with libertarians who grifted, starting with Ron Paul. So that's just part of being the politician. I that's the ugly side I don't care about. So I don't care about that. What I want to point out is 76% of Americans either think he was killed or they're not sure. 47% are saying he was killed. Only 37% of Americans believe Epstein took his life. This isn't a grift. This isn't this. This is about looking at it and going, well, let's look at this logically. The guards were gone, the camera. So if you put a gun to my head and I had to pick one or the other, I'd say he killed himself, but we'll never know. But I do know this, and I'm not defending them, is be careful what you wish for. If I was in charge, this is what happened. Well, you are in charge. And I believe you're lying to our face. You're not giving us the whole truth, and you have destroyed your reputations. You have destroyed what you say you stand for, because now you have to toe whatever line. I want to say the party line. What that party is, we don't know. Because my take is simple. Epstein was jailed. Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail. Well, for them to have been accused and convicted of pimping girls out, you had to have Johns. Who were the Johns? And so at the end of the day, the Epstein thing is important in the timeline and the overall bigger picture, or is an important factor. But the most important is, who were the Johns? And that's when every conspiracy theory, and we're pretty good on the conspiracy theories, starting with COVID.
Right.
You won't catch it if you take the vaccine. We see how that went. So don't sit there and laugh at the conspiracy theories. We tend to be right lately. Where do we stand on this one? I don't know, only because you put this logically, and there's a lot of questions. And the issue is they're not answering any one of those damn questions. They're saying the worst thing a government official can say. And what is that, gentlemen?
Trust me.
John already said, trust me. And if you look, what's that picture? You guys have seen that cartoon meme of the guy looking at the button and sweating to death? That was Dan Bongino, like at a sweat, thinking, trust me. I'm exaggerating, being sarcastic. But I'm like, dude, you just messed up. And it didn't start with him. It started with Pam, but I've seen this. Then all of a sudden, she's not saying anything. So this isn't just Patel or Bongino. See, I'm looking past the party protection. It's like Pam Bondi. It's all of them now, to me, are part of the cover-up. And there's a cover-up. Look, whether we want to admit it, there's enough, what do they call the evidence? Circumstantial evidence to go, yeah, the CIA was involved with JFK's death. It's just the hard evidence. We don't know what's happening. Hell, his school's gone. What else has been destroyed? My point is, that's kind of how I look at the Epstein. This is going to go down as one of America's first and foremost, or one of America's true conspiracy theories that's going to come out. But my take is, there's a list out there, and somebody's protecting it in the government. What I believe Epstein killed himself, if you put a gun to my head, but there's some kind of cover up. Maybe he didn't. And I'll be open to that. Maybe he didn't. But I find that hard to believe. The guards were removed. The cameras conveniently broken. I mean, if I was P. Diddy, I would have been scared bleepless going to that same prison. Oh, hell, man. I got a lot of names in my little book there. Will I last tonight?
Let's bring the comments on by Hody Johns. He has a few comments here. The plane was called Lolita Express. Anybody on that list knew what was up. Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of dirty stuff going on there. Holding the empty folders. And then opinions change when the guy who pays your bills has his name on the Lolita Express flight log.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So my take on this whole thing is...
right. But I don't think Trump's on that Lolita had much to do with anything at all. If they did, there would have been one name that would have come out. Yeah. It would have been Trump's.
Oh,
if they had any meat to that.
Especially the Biden administration. They would have pulled that thing out and said, look, here's Trump right here. Boom. I mean, that would have ended his re-election chances right then and there. He slept with an underage girl. I mean, that would have happened. But I do believe Dan Bongino. I've been listening to that guy for years. Now, I don't know Kash Patel, and I'm not going to say he's an honest guy because he's Indian like me. But I will say that Dan
You,
Bongino.
you mean him making money off his Kash apparel right before he got in office doesn't speak to his integrity?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
It's a
if
way to
you're a
make money.
celebrity,
We would do it in a heartbeat
Or
here
Dan
if we could,
Bongino
John.
wasn't profiting by pushing those theories on his show. Listen, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, right?
right, yeah.
And I'm not even speaking to the validity of their statements. But if you're someone who is a fan on there, a fan of theirs, I would just ask this to all their fans: have they lost any credibility with you? Like the fact that you believed them up until this point and you viewed them as saviors of sorts. By the way, I'll also throw in Bondi and I'll also throw in Tulsi Gabbard in that group, right?
Left wingers, what you're saying
Well,
right
she
there,
hasn't
this
said
is the
anything
difference
about
between
this.
left wingers and MAGA. They will turn, the MAGA will turn on you. They will, I mean, Dan Bongino has lost support. I've seen it on X. So it's the same as Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. They'll say, no, we believe Epstein did not kill himself and that there's a conspiracy. I don't share that belief. I think Epstein did kill himself. That doesn't mean that someone didn't force him to. Like Hitler wouldn't have killed himself if the Soviets weren't at the door. So
Oh,
the Soviets
understood.
really
Yeah,
killed him,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Even though Hitler's the one who pulled the gun. So I think I think Dan Bongino got in there, and yeah, maybe that was his opinion. I believe he seems to be an honest guy to me. So yes, he made money off peddling that idea that Epstein did not kill himself and he was murdered. And he gets in there, sees evidence, and he changes his mind. And I think that's valid to do. That doesn't negate that. Yes, he did make money on that previously. That doesn't mean he's a grifter. I totally disagree with you on that. Now, Kash Patel, I don't know enough about him, but if the iron's hot and you're a celebrity, yeah, I would make some hats and ties and sell my name.
No, see, look, I'm the last one I'm the last one who will tell you not to make money off something. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm faulting them for. I guess I'm speaking more, and I'll end it on this because I think it has to do more with more than just Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, which is this whole environment we have of taking what and by the way, I also fault like a lot of leftists for this, right? And some of my own libertarian extremists, right?
No,
Angela McArdle, who is actually a MAGA person, but these
Smith.
guys will take stuff they know that they're fabricating. They know they're fabricating it, and they will continue to push it with a straight face. And then when they get caught, it's not even like I got caught, the jig is up, okay, it was a nice ride or whatever, right? Like Hody is pointing it out. I won't put it on the screen right now, but Trump's name was on that list. And somehow we've whitewashed that. Trump was.
But was it, or was it just people saying it because it's Trump's derangement? That's what I'm saying. Show us the list. And you know who they say is on the list and is one of the biggest proponents? Show us this list now is Alan Dershowitz. He goes, I have spent what would be people's life savings to clear my name. Show us a damn list. That's how confident. When I heard that, I was like, damn.
Just because you went to his island doesn't mean you're
no. And by the way, Gee, I agree with you. Just because he went to that island or used that plane or whatever. Look, I love getting under the skin of some people, but the fact that Trump had all those pictures of himself partying in New York with Epstein, I just view it as two guys partying. But
see that, but don't you think that's a social circuit, John?
That's what I said.
New York
that's what I said. It's just two guys partying.
Yeah, but I mean,
Right.
you got to use it in that term because people are going to say.
No, but what I meant is like, why? If I say that, I don't immediately say Trump is guilty of whatever Epstein is guilty of. But at the same time, I also would look at someone who looks at a picture of Bill Gates and says, well, Bill Gates is a pedophile because he's on that list. Like, and it just, the conclusion goes.
Elon Musk said that this past week.
Yeah, and it's just.
Or insinuated that.
Who did?
Yes. Yeah.
Who did? Oh, Elon.
So
yeah. That's why I stay away from that, Big John. I don't talk about those things much and all because I got a lot of pictures with a lot of politicians going to the convention to that. Let's say I ran 10 years from now and Steve Bannon comes out of something. I got a picture with Steve Bannon. It could be grainy and all that. Somebody go, yes, you're trying to hide it.
I love getting under people's skin on X because they'll say, here's a picture of so-and-so with Diddy. And I said, you're absolutely right. The celebrities you hang out with is indicative of your character. And then I'll put my montage of Trump and Melania with Diddy, Trump and Melania with Ghislaine and Epstein, Trump and Melania with just about anybody you can mention that's been tarnished in the public eye.
Right.
Now, why is that? Because the guy had a hotel, he had a casino, he was on TV, right? So to me, it makes sense that he would take pictures and not even know who he's taking pictures with. I even told William, I give Trump a pass for taking for having Nick Fuentes at Mar-a-Lago. Nick Fuentes is a damn extreme right-wing nationalist. To William's point,
dude,
he's a Nazi, basically. But here's the thing. My point is, I said, okay, given Trump's personality, I am 100% willing to admit he didn't have a clue who was on that list. Some secretary of his or some staffer took care of it. But I'm saying apply that, if you're a MAGA guy, if you're a liberal, apply that standard that you would give the benefit of the doubt to your partisan, give it to the other guy until you see some actual proof.
Right, John, but here's your problem with that
I'm going to call it because the show's gone long enough, but I'm going to give the last word to Hody Johns.
Which one? The last one? Yeah.
Yeah. So Gates' wife left him because his name was on the list. Check my other comments. Trump's name is on the images. So we'll leave it at that. I think we're all unanimous that Dan Bongino probably saw and is telling the truth from his point of view. But we don't know the real truth of really what happened with Epstein. But this is why it's called Fired Up, because we get fired up here and we can go on some really big monologues and we can go back and forth, especially when we don't have all conservatives. We have a libertarian like Big John. So Big John, before we plug Fired Up here, why don't you plug your show one more time?
Sure. Every Thursday, catch new episodes of Liberty Lens that drop. It's not live, but we get brand new episodes every week with me and Mike Termott, focusing on one issue of interest to libertarians. And also Thursday nights with my co-host, Hody Johns, who is also helping us out with some comments tonight. Every Thursday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, live streaming right here on all the platforms on Grumblings Media. So thank you, G, for letting me step in tonight.
Yeah, and then this is Fired Up. We have Fired Up California that's released during the week as a non-live show, but this Fired Up, more about national issues, is every Friday, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, and we're on YouTube, Rumble, Apple, Spotify, and as William always says with the Spanish, y Pandora. So for myself, Big John, and William Del Pilar, we bid you a great weekend and enjoy Memorial Day this next Monday.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.